Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Chatting with Nuts. And this is episode number 49, which I realize the next episode's 50. And I feel like 10 episodes ago, I said I was going to do something like important. And now I'm like, well, I should have planned ahead, maybe. But regardless, we'll worry about that. Tomorrow, James will worry about that. But today, James is going to be conversating with a very good friend of mine. And that is Alex Tall Guy Reads. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you? It's been a long week. It's just like the end of the month. I work in finance, and first half of the month is always stressful, and the back half of the month's a little bit of a breather. So this kind of week has been stressful, but a little bit lighter. But
yeah, I mean,
it is what it is.
Shorter month too, right? So everything's kind of coming. Like I'm like ready to pay bills again, and I'm like, wait, hold on.
I know it's all compressed.
It is. It really is. Now, as far as reading, are you still on pace to hit your normal amount of books for your month, or are you finding February to be shortchanging you a bit?
Weirdly, I think it's different because I've read a bunch of short books, so I think I'm actually hitting a number that I would in previous month. But I've read some shorter books. Like I read Kindred, and I reread My Heart is a Chainsaw, I read that in like 2 days, and I love that book. So that was fun. But currently reading Dead House Gates, and I'm just taking my time with it and making my way through that one. So
let's go, dude. So you reread My Heart is a Chainsaw. Is there any reason why you're rereading it, or you just wanted to?
I just wanted to. The sequel just came out. I bought the sequel. I read My Heart is a Chainsaw like right when it came out. I think Brian Lee Durfee's review, and I was like, oh, I need to go buy this. Sounds like right up my alley. I've never read anything by Stephen Graham Jones. Bought it, loved it. It was a very interesting style, and there was a lot of references to 80s slasher movies. So like, I have no idea some of the movies that he brought into that book, but for the most part, I really enjoyed a lot of the references. He knows so much about that, like the cult movie community. And there's just movies I've never heard of, but interesting read. And I kind of just wanted to reread it because I didn't remember parts of it. And outside of the main character, I didn't really remember some of the other characters. And I was just like, if I want to go in the sequel, I heard the sequel is really good, and I kind of just wanted to reread it. So I did on audio, which I didn't do the first time. And that was, audio is pretty good. I don't know if I would recommend it for the first time you go through, though, because it's a little bit of a confusing book just in how it's structured.
Yeah, for sure. So I read The Only Good Indians, I believe is what it's called, by Stephen Graham Jones. Really liked it. I mean, there were some things about it that weren't my favorite, but I read that with Rhythma, and we had a blast with it. I really liked his voice. He kind of randomly went into second person at times.
He does that. Yeah,
gives you that McCarthy vibe a little bit, where you're like, wait, what's happening right now?
Yeah, I know. I definitely think that's one of the reasons why I like it. It definitely has a McCarthy-esque flavor to it, and the structure is crazy. He'll do second person, first person, and then do like news clippings throughout the books, and it's just very interesting. I still need to read Only Good Indians. I've heard some people absolutely love that book. Others don't like it at all, but
it's a little bit of a slow burn at the beginning, but like when it hits the fan, like I was like, it kind of spooked me, honestly, a little bit. Like I kind of, turned the light on the side. I'm like, and usually I don't get very creeped out because I'm a big horror fan, like horror movies. So you are too. I was to say My Heart is a Chainsaw, slashers. I feel like maybe you were also a scary movie fanatic.
Yeah, I love scary movies. Books is a different game. I think it's just interesting because I love horror books, but I've yet to find ones outside of Stephen King that I think all my horror reading has been Stephen King. So outside of that, it's like outside of that, I just haven't read a ton. And then I'm reading so much other stuff like fantasy and science fiction. It's hard to make myself go read horror outside of October. And so I try to fit it in when I can. Like when I'm in the mood for it, I try to jump on it because it's not all the time that I'm in the mood for something like that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's weird. Scary movies are like my jam, and I find more and more that like fantasy, specifically fantasy, because I'm pretty much there for sci-fi content when it comes on screen, like the Dune movie or Dark Matter that was on Sci-Fi. I think Netflix ended up picking it up. I enjoy The Expanse and whatnot, but for fantasy, like Game of Thrones adaptation, some other ones, but I am not a huge fan of a lot of the fantasy like movies and TV shows
I
that come out.
agree.
You know,
I've like fallen off on them. Like
same.
I'll start the series and then I won't finish it. I'll
Yeah,
like get halfway and I'll be like, yeah, I just miss an episode and then I just
and
goes
it's over.
downhill.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
over. I mean, I do that with a lot of television shows in
yeah, I
general,
do
but
too.
scary movies, it's like it could have a 6 out of 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm like, well, we better give it a shot. You never
Yep.
know.
Yeah.
I started.
Total throw in the dark. Who knows what it'll be. Like
Yeah.
my wife likes them too, so that's fun. Just because, well, she says she likes them, and then the second you turn it on, it's just a whole different story. But
I definitely had to convince Kelsey to join me on some scary movies. Like we always catch up on the year in October. I always say, okay, let's rent everything that was big this year. Let's find some hidden gems, maybe even in the B movie section. And we try to do 2 or 3 a week, right? Yep. And the one that I did not get to until recently was Incantation, which is a Taiwanese horror film. It's a found footage film. It's the #1 grossing Taiwanese film of all time. And it's on Netflix. God. It has an English dub, which is terrible, but I read enough, so I put on the dub. And I only made about 20 minutes in, and it is so ridiculous. Like, I actually really, really like it, even though I don't necessarily know if it's great. But to see someone else's take on found footage, like whenever they do, a lot of times in horror movies or even books, like it's a short scene. It's a very short scene. It's a lot of normal, short horror, then we're back to normal. Yep. The first horror scene in that movie is like 10 minutes long. Oh my God. I'm like, man, usually that's the end. That's like the climax. So I'm wondering what else is going to happen in this movie. I had to pause it because I'm an old man and I fall asleep whenever I watch TV in bed. But man, really, really enjoy scary movies. And I agree with you. I'm kind of the same way when it comes to books. I get in the mood and I'll read them, but it's almost always Stephen King. So I'm hoping this October I will switch it up just a little bit and maybe read outside of King. But it's hard because I love King and I know you do too.
Yeah. The other thing is he's written so much and there's so much I haven't read that I feel like, I love him as an author. I feel like I should be reading, what I haven't read by him.
Yeah.
And then, after you finish like all the major King books, you start getting into the ones that are super, super hit or miss. And
Tommy
it's
knockers.
A gamble.
Yeah.
Tommy knockers. Exactly.
Which I think King has said there was a 400-page book in there somewhere and it's 700 pages, which tells you everything you need to know. Commanda 83 says, I fell off watching House of the Dragon. I'm never in the mood to watch it. Everyone loves it, but I'm stuck on episode 8. I totally feel you. I mean, I loved House of the Dragon. So, I mean, you guys know that. But, Rings of Power, it got a lot of crap online from a lot of various different people, various content creators. But for me, I didn't necessarily hate the thing. Like, I watched it. I was a little bored, but like, I didn't think it was like overtly terrible. And I did plan on continuing it. And Alex, I just didn't, man. I just...
That's what happened to me. I got halfway. I think I missed one of the weeks. And then I just was like, well, I have to watch 2 episodes now to catch up. And then that just kept building and it never happened.
Yeah, I did the same thing with the Wheel of Time show, though I was definitely a little less interested in it. And then the new Willow show, I know it had mixed reviews as well, but I watched like 10 minutes and I was like, I'll get to this another time. And let's be honest, I'm never going back. It's never happening. I got too many books.
Are you watching have you watched any of The Last of Us?
No. And I suck.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me?
I know. I watched the first 3 episodes and then I was like, I'm really liking this. And then I missed the 4th one. I just haven't watched it since. And I keep seeing everyone tweet about it and like how good it is. And I'm just like,
I believe it's awesome.
To watch it.
I believe it's awesome, but I got to be honest. Did you play the game?
Mm-hmm.
I love the game.
I know.
I'm good. Like, I got the story in the game, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have made it. I've seen some people say that, and like they're missing a lot of the. I don't care. I don't agree with that. I think they should make the show. I think there's a lot of people who wouldn't play the game. They can tell a great story, has good writing. They're lifting things out of the game to put into the whatever. I don't like. I will watch it eventually, especially because Kelsey really wants to watch. She played the game as well and loved it, but I just felt like the game was a great experience, and I didn't necessarily want more. And then we got Last of Us 2. And we all know that was a mixed bag for a lot of people. And I don't know. It's just one of those things. I'm like, do I want to continue down this road and burn myself out on this? Because I'd like to replay the game maybe eventually.
Yeah.
So sometimes
feel the same way.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm happy it's doing well because I feel like anytime they've tried to adapt video games, it's
tough
gamble. And I feel like more often than not, it's not worked out. So it is really cool to see it doing so well. And, you
Yeah.
know what that means for other games if they decide to
Sometimes
go that way.
yeah, I mean, sometimes I forget that Witcher is a book series because I know the game so well.
I know.
I didn't mind The Last Wish is what I read first, and I actually really enjoyed it. But whenever I think of
Yeah.
the Witcher show, I'm like, well, that's a video game show, but it's not. It's
Yeah.
actually not.
That's a series I have not read. I own the last Wish and the other short story collection, and I just haven't gotten into it. I think I bought it when the show first started, and I didn't hate the show, and I was kind of into it. You know, I wasn't like I didn't have a huge presence online, so I wasn't seeing all the mixed feedback on it until I went to go look for it, and then I was like, oh, okay, people don't really like this.
Yeah.
But then I just haven't tried the books. I've heard so many mixed things about like translations and stuff, and so it's just kind of fallen down my rankings. I definitely want to try them. I don't know where I'll land on those, but
I was really high after The Last Wish, man. Like I was like,
yeah,
this might become something I really want to dive into every few months, kind of like I've done with Dresden. But I
yeah.
just haven't got back to it. But God, those illustrated editions and the new hardcover
Oh,
prints,
so nice.
they're
That
so
artwork is fantastic. So good.
like even if I read them and I'm like, these are pretty mid, I think I would just keep them on the shelf just for the aesthetics. Like, let's be
I
honest.
know.
Sometimes books get passes just because they're pretty. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, I've bought plenty of books strictly off the artwork, and I'm not ashamed about it.
No, not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Luis wants to know our thoughts on Midnight Mass. I think it's one of the best shows I've ever watched.
Yeah, I loved it. I think that was probably my favorite show by
Flanagan.
Flanagan. Yeah, totally blanked on his name for a second. Probably my favorite show that he's done out of the big Netflix horror ones.
Same
So far. Yeah, it was so good.
Did
Very
you check out
Stephen King
Midnight Club?
vibes.
Oh, definitely.
I haven't actually. Midnight Club. Yeah, it's
Didn't
I was
like it at
excited
all.
about it. Yeah, and then the premise, I was just like, we'll see. And then people were super mixed on it, so I just again didn't go out of my way to watch it.
Yeah, I liked everything he had done to that point, but honestly, I thought that show was really butt cheeks. Like it just had none of the weight, and it felt like kind of not focused. And there was like a lot
Yeah.
of side story, like flashback stories, and they were telling stories, and could have been maybe this cool layered cake, right, where they tell a story within a story within a story. We've seen King
Yep.
do that a lot. It didn't work. It didn't work for me at all, and I don't think that it worked for many people because I didn't see a ton of love for it online either. So
Yeah, I agree.
now he is supposedly trying to get Dark Tower created.
I did see that.
What do you think about that?
It's something that I would love to see done, and I do think that he's probably the best person to do it. I've never watched the movie until like randomly 2 months ago. I put it on and watched it, and I regret that decision. And it's just a series that I love, and it definitely could make a good show if done well. I believe that. I think they've done shows that prove that a book series like that could do well on TV. I don't know. I hope so. I would love to see it, and I think he's the best person to do it. But fingers crossed.
Noelle, by the way, says she enjoyed Midnight Mass, or she enjoyed Hill House more. I love all of them, but Midnight Mass
Yeah.
played on a lot of themes that I happen to think, one, are fascinating, and two, I thought they actually handled them quite well.
Yeah, I loved Midnight Mass. I loved Hill House too. Hill House
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah, they're all 10 out of 10s for me, which is why Midnight Club was so damn disappointing. It drove
Just
me
like,
crazy.
oh, nice. Another Flanagan show. Bummer.
I just feel like Flanagan doing Dark Tower is the only way it could ever be done proper. But I do worry about a lot of Dark Tower, not just for its content, because clearly there's a lot of very racy content in it, in Odetta and everything else, which I do think, has to be handled tastefully. And I think there's a lot there. I think you could actually expand on it a little bit, and especially the time period that we see Odetta in. I think that could be a compelling story that could speak to a lot of people. But what I'm more worried about is the wackiness of Dark Tower and people coming into this show and just being like, we were in Midworld, but now we're in New York. Like what is going on here? Why is there a talking train? Like there's so much that
there's a lot of absurdity.
It is absurdity, and I think it works in literature or a book because we have our own imagination. but how someone actually interprets that and sticks it on a television screen, I mean, it has to be one of the toughest adaptations for me
Oh
to
yeah.
to think about. I worry, and could it ever even live up to the imagination of a reader? I don't know. That's
I
a tough
know.
one.
And I think Kevin brought it up, but he mentioned Wizard and Glass, and I think that's a good example of something I
Yeah.
don't know how they would have fit into an adaptation because it's of how it's structured with the rest of the series.
Yes, I think you could maybe
Without,
do episodes, like every
yeah,
other episode or half the episode is a flashback. Now,
yep,
that kills momentum. I mean, we all know it. And that's why,
totally,
yeah, and I love Wizard and Glass, but I know Kev doesn't like it. There's a lot of people who don't like Wizard and Glass because they feel like it kills the momentum, especially where 3 ends up.
hmm
And I get that. I totally understand. I know how it can kill momentum, and that's always a challenge. It's kind of like the House of the Dragon time jumps. Like, it's just no one necessarily enjoys finding out that time has been skipped, but sometimes you got to
yeah,
do it. So with
yeah.
Wizard and Glass, maybe they condense it down to an episode. I think that that's also possible. Like your penultimate episode of whatever season it might be, you could do that.
That would be cool. Penultimate one,
It's going to be a tough sell, man. Whenever
right
they
before
bring
the. Oh my god,
I
I
mean,
just like don't even know who they're gonna cast. I know people were like speculating on who he was like having lunch with. They kept saying, "Oh, Flanagan's sitting down with X, X, and X to have lunch." Is it the Roland cast and whoever it is? And I don't know. We'll see. Because that's a major factor. I think like I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of bad decisions that can be made in an adaptation like Dark Tower.
I mean, and maybe there are parts of Dark Tower that could get fixed up a little bit. I mean, to be
Oh,
honest with you,
100%.
I think everyone, even if we love the tower, we definitely appreciate its flaws as well. And it's not
Mhm.
perfectly paced. There's some goofiness in it as well. And some people would say maybe anticlimactic parts, depending on who it
Yeah.
is. Baron's gonna yell at me and say, "Don't say that. You just didn't get it." Which he might be right, actually. But yeah, I don't
The
know.
last like
The
yeah.
last bit.
The, the last 3 books, especially like parts of Wolves of the Kala and probably specifically, I think would be people would just be like, "What the hell is going on? What am I
Yeah.
watching?"
I mean, it
Just
would
like,
definitely be one of the most memeable shows of all
oh
time,
yeah,
which we all know memes rule ratings. So
hmm
definitely one of the more memeable shows. But also, it would definitely be a water cooler show, except it's being released on. Well, we shouldn't say it's being released anywhere, but Amazon is the one I believe who is in talks for it, which means
yep.
that they would do. Oh, they do weekly releases now, don't
They
they?
do the. They usually drop like a couple episodes right at the start, and then do weekly after that. So you get to watch like 2 or 3 episodes right when the season airs, and then you wait every Friday or whatever.
Yeah. Which I think could work because water cooler talk is mandatory. Though I
Yep.
hate that I do hate the like it releases at midnight, so by the time you wake up, people have already watched it and you're
I
like
know.
spoiling it and all that good stuff.
Yep.
Amanda says Wizard and Glass would be like that weird Stranger Things season 2 episode. Possibly, yeah. Oh man. Yeah, a lot of Cuthbert fans here in the chat, and a lot of people talking about Wizard and Glass. I feel like Dark Tower is one of those series that a lot of people talk about, but um, I don't know a lot of people have read all of it. I know you. I probably
Yeah.
know maybe 2 handfuls, 3 handfuls of people personally. Obviously we
Yep.
have a lot of viewers and stuff, but it's not one that you see discussed a lot on our little fantasy side of
No.
BookTube.
I think the gunslinger is a very tough hurdle for a lot of people, especially if they've never read Stephen King before and they go in and pick up, they're like, "Oh, I'll start with the Dark Tower. I'm a fantasy reader. Try the Dark Tower." They read the gunslinger and they're like, "Yeah, no, it's not for me." And I don't blame them. It's like that book on a first read is very interesting, and a lot of people definitely won't like it. And I understand why. So
Yeah.
definitely makes it tough. And then book 2, is entirely different. Probably my favorite of the series, entirely different from book 1. And some people just like more cohesion between everything that's going on.
Yeah. I remember Daniel Green made a video and it was like not why you should read, but should you read The Dark Tower? And he kind of opens up with this thing as like, this is not something that I feel would appeal to the masses. And he's kind of right. Like I know longtime King readers who like don't mesh with it. And
Yep.
Alan from Library of Alexandria, our good semi-permanent co-host here on Chatting with Nuts, has a fantastic review of the first Black Company book. And he says
Mhm.
that the first Black Company book does a disservice to the series because it is not representative of the whole picture of what the series is and what it does. And he uses the Gunslinger and Gardens of the Moon actually as examples in that review. And that resonated with me quite a bit because I think that Gunslinger is very different from the rest of the series. But
Yeah,
I actually like Gunslinger. Like
I did
I'm
too.
a fan.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you mix Western and fantasy, I'm usually a fan of it. That's why
Yeah.
I haven't read Red Country yet, but I'm excited to read that one just because I do think I
You'll
will
love
like
it.
it.
You'll love it.
Yeah. Just because I am a fan of like Western movies. Not all Western movies, but a lot of the ones I've seen I've enjoyed. I like the aesthetic.
Yeah. There's a little Blood Meridian in Red
Oh
Country
yeah.
too that I
Oh
think that you
nice.
could enjoy, knowing your taste. Some Okido says, Mr. Tall Guy reads, have you covered Perdido Street Station? I remember you talking about it and haven't seen a video yet.
I have not done a specific video on it. I did cover it in a wrap up one point or another. That was a strange book. I did like it a bit. I wanted to, I still need to read The Scar. The Scar is the one is a book I'm really excited to read. And I think after that and Iron Council, I'll do like a video on all three books, because at this point I feel like I'm way too far removed from Perdido Street Station to do a deep dive into that book. But that was a very interesting read. And that's just, the first 150 pages, I was not sure if I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just very strange. I liked the visual, his writing in terms of the visual aspect of the city and everything else that was in it was really good. And I was immediately grabbed by that, but I didn't really know what was going on until like a third of the way through the book. And then I was really into it. But
Mm-hmm.
it has some things that the last 20 pages I've heard some people complain about, and I could 100% see that. And I just think, it's a great book with great ideas that I think will be better on a reread for me.
I could see that for sure. Yeah, the ending is like an anvil being dropped on the back of your head.
I know.
I mean,
just like out of nowhere. I thought we were wrapped up.
yeah. You're literally staring down, at this picture, and you're like, I think I finally figured it out. And then an anvil just cracks you in the back of the head and sends you into like a stage 8 coma. It's just like the worst thing that could happen. And I loved it. I was very conflicted about the end, but at the end of the day, when something sticks with me that long, it makes me really mull over it. It has some sort of value to me as a reader that I'm actually considering. Because how many times do we especially when we read a lot, how many times do we turn the last page and go, okie doke, next one off the pile? It just is what it is. And that was not the case with Perdido Street Station at any point. I felt like I always had to be paying attention. And China Miéville's writing style is just very, very unique.
Yeah, it is. I would agree with you. I think, the more that I think since joining BookTube, I've been reading way more, just like, and more diversely. I think I used to just be a binger. I would just binge series straight up. I think since BookTube, I've kind of read a book in a series, gone to read other things. Sometimes have binged multiple books within a series back to back to back. But I think because of that, the books that make me look back on them and think on them for weeks and sometimes longer than that, months after that, are the books that I remember and that stick with me the most. So something like, one that jumps out would be Dark Forest and that whole, the Three Body Problem trilogy. There's things about it that I didn't like, but overall, I've thought about that trilogy so much since reading it that it's stuck with it, that it had an impact on me. That some other science fiction just hasn't.
Yeah, I would say that with just Three Body Problem, Remembrance Earth's Past in general, that was kind of the thing. It's like, this is something that will like play into the way I think about things, even though a lot of what's discussed there is fringe theories, edge case, just really crazy stuff. At the end of the day, it is something that you can take time and think about, like, well, what if? And even if all those things are false, even if they cannot be proven, I think that it maybe maybe there's some value in taking time to pause and to consider the universe in that lens, which is horrifying, but it kind of puts in perspective problems. It kind of puts in perspective pride and ego and like everything that we take so serious in our universes of our heads. And yeah, I can't really speak highly enough of that trilogy.
Yep.
But it's a hard one to recommend to people who
It
aren't into
is.
sci-fi. It's very hard.
Yeah. And it's, it's weird because I am definitely a character driven reader, and that series is just not at all. So for me, it worked for other reasons, but I know plenty of people that it just probably wouldn't work at all. Just strictly for the fact that one, the writing, the prose itself is just not going to be something that they may like. And, there's just not characters that they can identify with as much as, something else that they may read in fantasy or science fiction.
Yeah, for sure. And, there's nothing wrong with having something that does something a little bit different. Right.
Oh yeah.
It's not Sun Eater sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
It's not that, which is just, in that we love it, but it's fantasy in space. Let's be honest, folks.
Yep.
That's what it is, and we love it for that. Dune, in a lot of ways, is that as well. And then you get something like Remnants vs. Past, and you're like, oh, these are where the science nerds went. Like, these are those people.
This is what they've been reading.
Yeah, that's what they've been up to. My God.
Yeah, I think
people. I'm just kidding.
That trilogy has definitely made me want to read more sci-fi like that, and so I have yet to find like recommendations outside of the big ones. So like Philip K. Dick is a big author that I want to read. That people say, he definitely has books and ideas that will make you sit there and kind of brain melt and just think on resonant and just really think about them for weeks on end after you finish those books. So I definitely want to check out his books, but there's just, for some people I know, Jonathan for Words in Time, I reached out to him after I finished the trilogy and I was like, what other science fiction would you recommend for someone who really enjoyed this trilogy? And he's just like, I've yet to find something that's like this. And then when it comes to the ideas, and I was like, oh, great. So I don't know. I've yet to find anything either. So
yeah, I'll be reading some Philip K. Dick, and you also read Octavia Butler. You said you just read Kindred. I'm starting out. I did Parable of the Sower. So what was your experience like with Kindred?
Well, Kindred was great. I think I have not read any Octavia Butler. I started with Kindred. Kindred's a very heavy story, so I probably would have read it. I think the first thing I said after I finished it was, I wish my schools had made me read this, and I know a lot of schools do, but my schools never did, and I just feel like it was one of those books that just took science fiction and applied it to a very humanistic level and took a look at, problems in our history and put you face to face with those situations in very uncomfortable ways at times. And I think that's really important. I think Octavia Butler's writing style worked very well for that type of story. And I was like, I remember after finishing it, I was researching, some background of Kindred. And they were saying the way Octavia Butler wrote the story is, in a similar format to real slave narratives of slaves that survived slavery and then went on to write their information about, their experiences under captivity. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And so looking back at it, her writing style, she doesn't really have like a super flowery writing style or anything like that. It's very kind of McCarthy-esque in the way that it's, pretty straightforward. And it just worked really well. And it was short. I hit me on a lot of emotional levels. And I'm just really happy I read it. I think that's a book that I've wanted to get to for a long time. And there's a lot of Octavia Butler I want to read, but Kindred was definitely the book I wanted to start with, just because one, I own it and I don't own anything else. But two, I just think, it's just a very important book, I would say, in science fiction. I think, even people that don't like the book doesn't work for them. I think most people recognize the importance of that book in terms of what it's discussing and the topics that it's tackling throughout. And so it's interesting.
Wow. Yeah. I kind of love what you said about the style there, and the style is it is the story, as Ursula K. Le Guin would say. And that is a example of how powerful a style can be, and not necessarily needing to be, beautiful writing per se, but the right type of writing. And it sounds like she landed for you, which is awesome to hear. I want to read Kindred. I'm going to start with Parable of the Sower because I own it. That's the reason why I'm doing it.
Hey, best way to go.
Yeah, I bought it like right before COVID, I think, and then
Mhm.
I hear it has some similarities to it, so I've put it off for a bit. I'm like, I think I've lived this historical moment. I think I'm good. Like, I want to move on to
Yeah,
something else. But her and Philip K. Dick were on my list for top 5 authors to read for the first time, and both I think are going to be doing different things. But I'm excited to kind of broaden my sci-fi spectrum just a little bit. And somebody
yeah.
mentioned Media Death Cult as a great place for recommendations. I couldn't echo that enough.
Oh,
Moyd,
yeah. His videos are awesome.
one of the best book related channels on the platform. It's not even close. He is fantastic,
Yeah.
and just really good at this. Like, he's good at entertaining. He's good at this
Yeah.
YouTube thing, but also seems like a great dude with a lot of really good sci-fi recommendations. So we always point
Definitely.
people over there. And Words in Time is another one. Obviously, Fit to Be Read is another sci-fi
Fit to be
creator.
read.
Yeah, Mike's a great guy. So it's very, very fun to broaden our horizons a little bit. You know, we are fantasy readers primarily, it seems, but I know me and you both enjoy some literary fiction.
Mhm.
We both read Crying of Lot 49. I think both of us came
That's a
away.
fun one.
Yeah, we came both away like, oh, well, whatever.
Yeah. I have not. Let me talk about a book I have not thought about since finishing at all.
I don't want to think about it, to be honest.
I continuously forgot I even read that book. Like, it was just right at the tail end of the year, and I was just like, "Oh, I did read that. Forgot about that." But
Yeah, I didn't hate it. I didn't
yeah,
hate it, but I don't know if I got it.
yeah. I think it's sometimes books that are that short don't work for me, and I think that's sometimes where there is a type of book. I'm trying to think of another book like this. I don't read a lot of novellas or short stories, which is something I want to get better at and I want to read more of. I just struggle with like books that are under 200 pages. I feel like a lot of times the experience I've had with them is that just wish they were longer and I wish they were more flushed out. And I usually feel that they're, not what they're not to their fullest potential.
Mhm.
And I think a good example of this was, God, what's that Stephen King book? Elevation. I think it was like 70 pages or something.
Yeah.
Like, came
My
out a
dad
few years
did not
ago.
like that. My dad did not like that book.
Yeah, I read it and I was like, what? Like, this is nice, but this could have been in like a novella collection or something cool. And it was just interesting.
Meanwhile, he's stretching out
Oh,
Tommy knockers to 700 pages. What are you doing, King? Well, I know you're doing. I know what you're not doing. Cocaine.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to ask, you read, God, what's it called? Station 11, right? Emily St. John Mandel.
Oh, what a great book.
Yeah. See, that you were talking about the Octavia Butler book and how you got that at COVID and you didn't want to read it at that time. I read Station 11 right at like April 2020. And I really enjoyed that book, but I feel like the timing was not good. So that's a book I really want to reread. And I really liked her writing style. But I just don't think I was in the mood for that type of story. But it is a really interesting book. And it's a book that a lot of people don't really talk about. I don't see, at least in fantasy and sci-fi booktube, I don't see people bringing it up that much, even though it definitely would appeal to a lot of readers of science fiction, I think, specifically.
Yeah, I think so. And the adaptation is incredible on HBO.
Yeah,
David Cross is in it. So I'm in.
Oh
I
my
love
God.
David Cross. I'm such a David Cross mark. Like, he's my dude. But if anyone's wondering, I mean, the show is phenomenal. There are definite changes from the book, but I think they're actually good changes in some ways. There was some stuff that I thought was a little over dramatized for my taste, because the thing I enjoyed about Station 11 is told very matter-of-factly, like, this is how this is. There's a dude, this isn't really a spoiler, but if there's one guy who has a computer running and he's bicycle pedaling to keep it going, and you're just like, what is going on? Sea of Tranquility is a book that I'm very interested in, that Alpha has just said in the chat. I saw someone on my plane ride this week on the way out reading it, and I wanted to talk to him, but the guy just seemed like such a douche that I was like, I can't. And then I was like, maybe I don't want to read that book. And I was like, this guy's ruining Emily St. Mandel for me. This guy is a double douche.
Should have asked him. Maybe he hated it, and then you would have been like, yes.
Well, he was reading very slowly. I judged him very hard.
Yeah.
Like, he got through like 20 pages in a 5-hour flight. It's like, bro, come on.
Gosh.
If you spend less time yelling at your wife, you would probably have more time to read. Sorry if you're watching. I'm sure he's a huge fan, because everyone is. I'm sorry, but you were a douche, unfortunately. Yeah, Station at 11 was really, really good. So one of, if not my favorite post-apocalyptic work. And I just read another one this week, and I got to look on my phone, and it's one Amanda recommended to me, even though she hadn't read it yet. She had heard about it, and it was under 200 pages. I think it was maybe just a little bit over. And it is called Leave the World Behind by Rumen Alam. And
I think I actually have that book somewhere.
Yeah, I would love to hear someone else's take on it, because I came away conflicted with it. I'm glad I read it, and it's certainly not a bad book, but at times I felt, when books like try to be relatable, like everyone hates this, like, and then they pointed out, it's the Jerry Seinfeld type deal. I felt like the author was taking shots at all of like little things that people talk about. Like he was trying to hit on that personal level, but it was kind of scattered. And for me, that it bothered me. Like I noticed it. Like he talks about cilantro. How there's the DNA thing. If you have a certain strand, cilantro tastes like dish soap or something like that. Like everyone talks about that now. Like it's on TikTok or all this stuff. And he like used that, mentioned it like 3 times. I'm like, dude, we got it. Like we these are everyday people. Like I get it, dude. But there's parts of that book that are really good, like for the post-apocalyptic piece, and like the tension that he builds in some of those moments are awesome. But I felt Station 11 was one of the most consistent. Like I love The Stand, even if people hate the ending. I really love that book. But Station 11 could be my favorite post-apocalyptic book. It really could. It's really good.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I like that it's not 1,100 pages like The Stand is or whatever. And I also love Swan Song. But that's another 900-page book, so it's hard to recommend.
Yeah,
a lot of people are looking for post-apocalyptic fiction, but
and I like Swan Song. I actually felt like Swan Song was almost a little too tight. Like, it's a really solid book. There's not much about it that I could point out to be like this wasn't good. But I came out of it wanting a little bit more, and I felt like the ending was super optimistic, which I'm
it was.
I'm a piece of shit. I guess I just like sad endings or something. But like I was just like
I was surprised, but I was surprised by it because everything leading up to it was the exact opposite of optimistic.
Brutal.
And so it did come out of nowhere. Because like parts of that book, I mean, they were dark, and it was like, okay, we're going here. And I loved that.
There's a pro wrestler in Swan Song, so I immediately was like, oh no. People probably thought I would enjoy this part, but I'm not going to. And I will say that it was fine. It didn't bother me. It actually, I mean, I could be pedantic about it, but I thought that actually it was decent representation. And it wasn't over the top. I was afraid that it was going to like play into the character the whole story, and it doesn't, thankfully. So very happy about that.
Some Okie dude says The Road, and I've totally forgot.
I forgot. The Road.
Top easily.
Yeah.
Fantastic book. I think, RJ asked me 100 times. RJ from RJ Reads, if you guys don't know, great guy. He asked me like 100 times what to read as his first McCarthy book, and I said The Road. Probably I just think based on what you've liked before, try it. He ended up reading No Country for Old Men, which I think is another great place to start, and loved it. So I think he's reading The Road next. I'm very excited to see if he likes it.
The Road's pretty different, but also in some ways the same. I mean, there's a lot of biblical aspects to The Road, of course. The Road works for me for a very personal reason, and that is just how it is. There's something about that book that I just personally connect to, and it's hard for me to discuss it outside of that. It's very hard to remove myself from that. So it's one of my favorite books of all time. I mean,
it's so good.
Yeah, it definitely is. I could see why people don't like it. I've had people say, it feels a little cheesy towards the end, and I understand that. I wouldn't fault someone for feeling that way. But I Am Legend is another one that I Am Legend really so good. Love. Such a good book. Oh, actually, Key just said I Am Legend is one of my favorite post-apocalyptic novels. Yeah, I read it in high school. Legend. I read it in a day. I loved it. So good. And I actually like the Will Smith adaptation. I know
I did too.
Some people hate it, but I actually, the dog scene.
Oh my God. Every time.
Brother.
Literally. I heard that. I saw a news, something on social media, probably Twitter, said they're making a sequel now, and they're going to use the alternate ending from the first movie as canon. And they're going to just make a sequel. That's interesting. I was like, really? But it's not other things you could adapt or make. But I mean, we'll see how it is. I will not judge it until it comes out.
Yeah, I mean,
but I am excited.
I will absolutely watch it. It might
Oh
end up
yeah.
being terrible, but I'm definitely going to give it a shot. And also, I should bring this up. Someone asked us if we had any reaction to the news about the new Lord of the Rings movies being in production. What are your thoughts?
Well, at first, I haven't read the full article. I think someone who posted in one of the discords I'm in said that it's not replacing the original movies or the main trilogy. It's like
Yeah.
a new story in the world. So I feel better about that. I think at first, the way it was being announced made it seem like we're just going to straight up replace the 3 movies. And I was like, this is the most unnecessary thing in the world.
Yeah.
I still think it's unnecessary. I don't see why we need to make more stories. It depends on what they do. I mean, there is actual J.R. Tolkien lore, like Silmarillion and everything else that is out there that they could adapt and probably be really good. But it just depends. I mean, if they just, I don't know. Like we were talking about Rings of Power. I didn't finish watching the whole show because, I just missed episode, lost interest. And I just think with an original story in a world that we all know and love, it's just a gamble. So who knows?
Yeah, it's certainly a gamble.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm usually the person that always says, why not? Like if they're going to do it, like,
yeah,
they're going to do it. I mean, it makes money and that's what they need. And Hollywood's, creatively bankrupt at this point. They don't have anything new to add, no new IPs, and they're too afraid to take risks on these new things. I don't understand why that is, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm super excited, and I'm not going to say that I'll definitely watch it because I don't know if I will.
It's definitely not going to be one I'm like counting down the days till the release or anything like that. I will absolutely give it a shot. We'll see how it is. I actually don't know enough about it. Like, do they have the rights? I know Rings of Power and Amazon don't have the rights to any of the Tolkien stuff, so like they actually couldn't adapt anything.
Well, it's Warner Brothers, so I think I don't know where that lies. I don't know if they're the ones with the rights. I don't understand all this stuff, to be honest. Like, I don't understand how Rings of Power, they got like a page of the appendices, and they're like, that's good. We're fine.
5 seasons.
Seems crazy to me. I mean, it'd be like someone be like, yeah, well, we didn't get Gurm's rights, but we got The World of Ice and Fire. We got page 1. And we're just going to make a story up about that. Like, I'd watch it, but the worst part about hearing this announcement is all of the trailer reaction videos I'm going to have to see in my feed. That's actually the worst part when I see a new Lord of the Rings or anything get announced. I'm just like, oh God, it's going to be 3-hour breakdowns of the costuming and why it's bad and how the show's doomed. And,
just wait till what's coming this year. I think Wheel of Time season 2.
Oh, are they still doing that?
I think so. I haven't heard anything. It feels like it's been 2 years at least. It might have been a year and a half or something.
That's the new norm, though. I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah. House of Dragon's not going until 24
June 2024, and I think if like the quality maintains, especially speaking of House of the Dragon, like if that quality were to maintain, or even Wheel of Time, like even though I don't like the show, like obviously there's a ton of work being put into it, so it kind of makes sense that the new show standard is 2 years. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about always having to wait 2 years. I mean, no one likes to wait, but I guess as long as it delivers, that's fine. But we're going to get a lot of Wheel of Time season 2 trailer breakdowns, aren't we?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I feel like it's it's definitely a case by case basis. There are shows that will do the 1 year for the first 4 seasons, and then the final season they'll take like an extra year to make it perfect, and it ends up usually disappointing a bunch of people. So see how it goes. Oh my gosh. I actually don't remember the time between the last couple of Game of Thrones seasons, but I feel like it was over a year.
It was, yeah.
The last couple of seasons.
Yeah, 7 and 8. I mean, 8 was 2 years. I think, so
yeah.
Yeah, and that's the best they could do. That's not a shame. Some Okidu says, Jimmy, was the Fantasy Network meant to be suggestive or is just unfortunately named? So I am unfortunately named. And it was going to be the Fantasy Network. But I was like, God, what a generic, like lame, I liked the initials TFN. I don't know why I did. Thursday Night Football turned around, I guess. But I said, okay, well, what if we go with the Fantasy Network? It would at least people read it twice, maybe. So it's a play on network in my name. And like most things in my life, I don't actually expect it to succeed, and then it does, and I'm like, God, I really wish I wouldn't have picked that name. Like, what a bad idea. I did the same thing in wrestling multiple times. It's just not a it's not a name that I love, but we're here and we're stuck with it. There's parts of me that wishes that I would have just made the channel Jimmy Nuts, like Daniel Green or Murphy the
Yeah.
Peer, like
Yep.
those channels. I think you get a little bit more leeway with what you can cover. If I don't cover fantasy, I feel like I'm a bit of a fraud at times, which is a
Like it's
problem.
in my name.
Which is a problem because I do read
Yeah.
outside of that. And I think I had was it November? I think I read only one fantasy book and I read a bunch of like literary fiction. And I was like, oh no, it's crisis time. Like, do I become the fantasy / literature? I don't know
Yeah.
how that works.
Did people respond? Did people, comment, call that out or anything? Or is everyone just super friendly?
No, everyone's cool, dude.
Yeah.
I have been
That's the
very
thing.
fortunate. Yeah, I've been fortunate. I've cultivated a pretty reasonable community of people. And there's only so many people in the world that are like that. So as the audience grows, I'm sure there'll be more
Oh yeah.
more dissenting opinions, but I've been very lucky with the people that I have attracted to my channel. And I think that's pretty evident in the patron Discord too. Like, everyone's really nice
Yeah.
and supportive, and we disagree a lot. There's a lot of disagreement. People claim other people are wrong, but it's all love at the end of the day. So I think people also do appreciate someone reading outside of the genre, like whenever you cover a lot of fantasy or speculative fiction, because it gives you a different perspective on voice and writing and what's good and what isn't. And what I see a lot of times is people who only read fantasy, which is totally fine. They'll come across something that isn't like other fantasy, and they'll be like, "You can't do this. Second person POV, that's not right." And it's like, well, outside of the genre, that happens quite a bit. That's a really cool way to experiment with a voice, and I like the fact that I'm able to give a little bit of a different perspective, even though I don't read a ton of literary fiction or classics or anything.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, you see it even with authors, plenty of fantasy authors that I have watched interviews of read a ton outside of the genre. Like, I know a number of fantasy authors who say that they barely read fantasy. Like, they are writing fantasy all the time, that when they actually sit down to read, they're reading like horror and thriller and whatever, like actual nonfiction or whatever they're reading. And it's usually a solid mix. At least, some of the authors that I've watched stuff on. So like Hobb and Abercrombie. And
yeah, I think it gets harder the longer you're in it. Now that I remember you watching my channel back in the day. I remember before you had a channel. I mean, you were just a loyal viewer, and you took the leap and got in front of the camera. Do you find yourself restricting what you watch on BookTube because maybe it's a book you want to cover, or it's too close, or anything like that?
I definitely find myself watching less BookTube. And I don't know if it's a conscious thing, like, oh, I want to avoid videos like that. I usually, if there's a book I know I want to read and cover, I usually don't watch a video until after I've made some stuff on it, just because I don't want anything influencing that I'm saying. And then it depends. I don't know. I feel like it's something that people always say, to saying like, oh, BookTube takes a lot of time, like just making videos, editing videos on top of reading the books that you're talking about in the videos. And I think it's something that I realized going into it, and it's been very apparent, especially as I've made it, like, once you get past the initial excitement of it and you're making videos regularly, and you're like kind of 6 months after you start your channel, and you've grown like some type of base, and a lot of people are you have a community of people that are watching your videos. It changes a little bit, and I feel like if I have free time, where I used to be watching a lot of BookTube or listening to a lot of BookTube, I'll instead be using that time to write a video, or take notes for a video, or read a book, or something that's more directed towards like my community. And I think it's a bummer, because sometimes I do wish I could just sit down and rewatch everyone's video. But because that, when I do watch BookTube, usually it's pretty I'll do like the Alan thing and watch everything at like 1.5 speed or whatever like BookTube is. But yeah, I don't know, it's a bummer. And there's just, with BookTube, there's so many, the community is so awesome and welcoming, that there's a lot of booktubers out there I really love watching. So there's a lot of videos that are constantly being posted, and then I'm just like, basically every single time I refresh YouTube, there's like a couple of new videos I need to watch. And so it is really fun to sit down and watch those. I just don't get to do it as often as I did, before starting a channel.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is tough also because, like, as your channel grows, you meet more people, you bring more, you collaborate, and then you have, instead of 10 people that you watch regularly, you have 50 people that you need to watch regularly. I am very much like you. I like, for instance, Book of the New Sun, book 1, Shadow of the Torturer. Philip Chase just put out a review, and everyone said, man, it's like one of the best reviews of that book. It's so well done. And I was like, that's great. I'm never going to watch it until I read it, and I do, because I'm reading that book this year. And if I watch Philip Chase talk about that book, I'm going to go, well, everything has been said that needs to be said about this book. And
what else could I say?
Yeah, I watched so much First Law content that I ended up making very little First Law content on the channel as well.
Yeah.
It's kind of happened with Earthsea a little bit too, which is weird because it's not as popular here on BookTube, but I've watched a lot of stuff on it. And I would say out of like everything that I've read, Earthsea is the thing that I'm shocked I haven't made more content about, because I love the first 3 books so much. Like, I just fell in love with them. But I watched too many videos, and now I'm like, where do I fit into this? And like, do I have anything to say that isn't just reiterating? And if I ever do reiterate something, I want it to be by coincidence, not osmosis or any influence. So it is tough.
It's difficult too when you have like a series of books you're reading or a trilogy or something, because if I'm really enjoying something, I get super excited about it, and then I'll want to watch videos on it, and it's really hard not to. And plenty of times I end up watching a bunch of videos on these books, and I'm like, well, now I don't know what else I can say that would just not really feel original to myself. And then I would feel disingenuous, and that's not a good feeling. So, just try to be as strategic as I can be when it comes to what I'm reading and what I'm going to be watching videos on versus my TBR. Timing of it. But
I remember when I made my Red Rising trilogy review, that was one where I had watched a lot of people talk about it, because when I first joined BookTube, that was the red hotness. Like, everybody was talking about it. I think Dark Age may have just come out. I joined in 2020, so whatever book had came out around then,
it's probably, I think Dark Age
was a Dark Age
2019, 2020.
Well, it was all the rage, right? And I had watched so many things on it, and when I read it, I had thoughts, and the viewers really wanted me to cover it. Like, people were like, oh, you got to read Red Rising, like, from day one. So I ended up making that video, and I don't love that video very much, because I remember how I felt when I was making it, and I felt like I was just regurgitating points, not because I didn't have an original thought, but just because I ended up feeling like a lot of other people do. I didn't think there was a lot of meat on the bones with that series, and I don't mean that in a super negative way. I just mean, like, things happen and react, but there wasn't a lot of like themes that I could delve into. There wasn't a lot of personal attachment to characters, even for me. So while they were entertaining and I had a great time with it, it wasn't like an all-time favorite. And I had also kind of watched it to death when it came to content. So that was like one of the more challenging reviews I did. And I remember coming out of it being like, that wasn't a video I definitely wanted to make. And I felt really bad about it. But the funny thing is that I've had multiple people comment and say that's the best Red Rising review that they've ever seen, which I don't agree with.
I love that. I love that.
I appreciate it. Like, I'm so thankful that people found it, and that's what makes it, that's why I have it up still. But I just felt like I wasn't adding anything to that conversation, and it was also a super long video, and I think I was sick. I just remember that video being my least favorite video I've ever made, which is weird.
I think like, well, I think first, do you have any plans of reading the sequels, Iron Gold and Dark Age? So I'm very interested to see what you'll think of those, because it does go multi-POV, and you get more insight into some other characters, and he definitely becomes a better writer, like significantly, I think, in my opinion, from the first trilogy to Dark Age. And it's just much darker. And I think parts of it you will enjoy much more, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm just excited to see what you think of that one. But as you were saying, I think an example of that for me is something like, Sanderson. I watched a ton of videos on Sanderson books before I ever made a channel. So like Mistborn, Stormlight, You know, when I was reading Wheel of Time, I was watching the stuff about the books that he did. I have not read Stormlight. I've like tried to read it, and it's just has never. The timing's always been off, and I'm worried that I'm not worried, but like I feel like when I read Stormlight, I won't have a lot of original thoughts to say, other than maybe some reaction to certain events. But that's also the same thing that happened with Mistborn. And I did make a video about it, but mainly because my favorite book was in that trilogy was not what a lot of people have as their favorite book. But outside of that, I feel like that trilogy, I really enjoyed it. But outside of the fact that my favorite book was book 2, a lot of people, I agreed with a lot of what a lot of people were saying about, that trilogy. So, it's difficult.
It is difficult. I think one of the things that has helped me kind of go into really popular books that maybe not even I've watched a lot of, but I've heard a lot about, because we're interacting with comments all the time, we're in discords and stuff, is to try to pin down why I feel a certain way. Because a lot of times we just say, hey, this character doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And I also think it's more interesting for the viewers to hear why you might think that. But there's a lot of times we just throw something out there, right? The pacing was a little wonky, but why do I feel that way? I'm reading a book now, which I will keep mysterious, because I just want to drop the review out of nowhere for it. But I'm reading it, and there's a character who is a lot like other characters that I really like a Jaime Lannister, right? Flawed, kind of a bad boy. And I'm like, this isn't working for me as much as it has worked in the past. And I took like a half hour, and I also talked to Alan about this, and he always helps me kind of curate my thoughts. But through it, I was able to really pin down like, okay, this is why this doesn't work for me. So instead of just stopping at like, I shouldn't say it doesn't work for me, but it isn't working as well as it works for everyone else. Like, I'm able to come to the conversation now with at least something different and more of an explanation about why I feel that way. So
I'm very curious what book you're talking about.
Yeah, it's not a popular opinion. So I think it'll be interesting whenever I end up unveiling that. But I think Stormlight, there's a lot of words in those books, dude. I think you'll find something to talk about.
Okay, yeah.
There's a lot of words.
I'm sure. That's a series that, I definitely feel like I will enjoy, because for all of its flaws, I did enjoy a number of things about Wheel of Time, and especially the end of it. I think Brandon Sanderson, I haven't read nearly as much as Sanderson as a lot of other people, but I did think he handled the end of that series really well. And so I feel like my enjoyment of that, what I liked about Mistborn, I was like, well, I feel like I will at least enjoy Stormlight for what it is. We'll see, but I'll go from there. I'm worried that the more other type of fantasy I'll read, that it might change my viewpoint on Sanderson as I read it. But also, it could be like, it could feel really comforting too, reading a lot of dark, heady stuff, and then coming into reading like something like Stormlight and being like,
well, Stormlight has its moments, man, that are pretty.
I've heard. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this about Sanderson, and this is why, I've read a lot of other stuff, and I know Sanderson always gets a lot of heat. But the thing I like about Stormlight is that there's not a ton of series out there that are current and running that have the scope of Stormlight.
Well, that's something I'm really excited about.
Yeah, sure. Epic. 10 books from the start, like planned with 2 major arcs. There's very few people doing it on that scale right now.
And the community around it is really cool. Like how just all the theorizing about it. I mean, that's something I loved about, Game of Thrones when the show was going. Like, I loved people speculating, and I just think it'd be really cool to be a part of that discussion.
Yeah,
with a series that big as Stormlight.
Yeah, I think that it is probably the most prominent generator of excitement when it comes to new releases. I kind of talked about this on the last episode, but like, that new release high, it's there for some stuff for sure. Like, there's buzz, but that felt big. Like when Wither of War came out, I was like, damn, Like, I got to be on this. This feels exciting to be a part of something and not just be my normal self where I'm like, meh, I'll read it later. Like Fairy Tale, I like jumped off the bandwagon. I'm like, I'll read it later. You know, so
not a bad decision.
sometimes it's fun to secede to the hype train and to read something and enjoy it with people. The Black and Blue Collar reader says, well, this sucks for me. I'm a new reader and a new tuber, and all the books I read are actually suggestions from booktube. So I've actually watched your channel and I really enjoy your stuff. And this should not suck for you. I'm certainly not saying don't make content about books that people have taught. I'm not saying that is the nature of what we do here. I'm just saying for me personally, there are certain series or things that I've overexposed myself to where it doesn't get me going. My blood pressure doesn't start, my heartbeat doesn't start increasing when I start talking about it. You guys have seen the videos where my blood pressure is through the roof. Wall of Storms would be the one that
that video.
I'm just great. Screaming at the camera, you know, out of breath, like reminding myself it's not live. Like, you can actually take some time. There's just other things that people would expect me to be very excited about, and I just end up reading it and being like, okay, you know, that was fun, but I don't have anything to say. So I'm certainly not discouraging anyone for making content about whatever, Red Rise, Stormlight, or anything.
Oh yeah.
And Alex, that's what I'm telling you. Like, I think Stormlight, I think that you'll be surprised. I think that there's a lot of stuff in those books that don't go mentioned. Like, I think there's an antagonist in there that is one of my it's Sanderson's best character in my opinion, which I won't say because it is a bit of a spoiler, but also one of my favorite antagonists that I've read in fantasy. And they're not overly terrible, you know, like Lancelot in the Warlord Chronicles or anything, but it's a good character, and there's a lot of layers to it. And I think also proposes some really interesting thematic questions in Stormlight. So I'm excited to see what you have to say about it. And
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And hey, who everyone loves it. Like, you'll make the video and a ton of people will watch it, because if you want views on booktube, I'm gonna give you the hack that they don't want you to know. Just post Brandon Sanderson content.
Hashtag Sanderson. Hashtag Cosmere.
Hashtag Sanderson sellouts. No, I'm just it's crazy to me. My Way of Kings review is 45,000 views, and I'm like, that's one of my worst reviews on the channel. Like, hands down, one of the worst.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm really excited to read that series. I think it's like the Black and Blue Collar reader was saying, you know, the first video I did on BookTube was like popular series I want to read. And all of them were series that were recommendations from BookTube. Like, those are the series I wanted to prioritize, you know, Poppy War, Stormlight Archive, Gentleman Bastards, stuff like that. And you know, some of them I've read and really enjoyed. Some of them I just haven't gotten to yet, and they've actually fallen down my prioritization list, and that's been really interesting. But I just think there's plenty. The thing is, some series are popular for a reason, and you will enjoy them for that reason. And so, you know, definitely don't prevent yourself from talking about a book if something gets you really excited and you're enjoying it, even if it's talked about all the time. Like, I just think, you know, if you're excited about something, that usually makes for the best content. That's right.
Yeah, and that's where I am at with content creation. Like, it has to be said. I don't even like saying content creation. I make videos. I film it on the stupid camera. You know, it's got to get the blood pumping, and so I think you find yourself a little surprised whenever you know something is really popular. Everyone wants you to read it and react to it, but it's just not something that's in your heart. And then that's it. And you'll know, they may not know, but you'll know that your heart wasn't in it. And that is a very bad feeling. Unless if you're doing this and you do want to be the next, you know, Daniel Green, and you want 500,000, which I'm sure everyone would like. But I mean, there are people who that is their goal. Like, their goal is only growth, and that's fine. It is an open platform for people to do so. But
yeah, I guess I had a question for you.
Okay.
Do you find that there's a certain amount of time that goes by since finishing a book till when you can do a review, or like when you want to talk about that book on a specific video? Like, do you ever feel like enough time goes by after finishing a series or something that you're just kind of like, I don't know, it's been 3 months since I finished a series, I'm not going to make a dedicated video or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on how good my notes are. For that reason, I started taking better notes, because there were times where I was like, I need to post a video and I haven't finished a book this week. And that thing I could review was 2 months ago, but I don't remember enough. And I don't want to say anything wrong, because God forbid, if you get a detail wrong. Yeah, I don't know. And then there's also a bit of me that doesn't want to film a review after I flip the last page and close the book, because it takes me a lot longer than that to balance it out, because I'm not reading just for myself sometimes. Sometimes I'm reading for all of you and the people who watch my channel, and I have to figure out a way of kind of balancing that. So I think it takes some time and consideration to formulate my thoughts. But there are times where I just want to turn on the camera and go off. And that last one I did that for was Wall of Storms. I mean, I really, and I stand by that, actually. And that's the thing I'm happy about. God, yeah. I was worried I'd regret that, but I don't. I don't at all. Awesome. And I was still able, I was still able to kind of, balance things out, because I didn't like books 3 and 4 as much in Dandelion Dynasty. And I feel like my opinion of book 4 actually dropped a little bit the further I got away from it.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I think in my review, I said I like Wall of Storms, then Speaking Bones, but now I feel like it's Wall of Storms, Grace of Kings by a large margin, and then Speaking Bones and the Veiled Throne. And that's just after a while of saying, but what am I going to do? Sit on the review for 6 months and wait for my mind to change? There's plenty of reviews I put out that they haven't changed. My Rage of Dragons review, I'm like yelling at the camera that it's like the best, and do I think it's the best now? No, but at the time I did. So I hope
capturing a moment.
Yeah, I hope that people take that into account whenever it pops up on their home screen. They click on it, the date underneath it. And like, I used to be rotten at reviews, and it's taken a lot of work to get better. And I'm trying my best.
It's tough. It's probably the hardest type of video that I've had experience with so far.
Yeah,
for me, just because there's always something that, at least for me, I feel like there's always something I want to say, and I either totally forget it or I say the wrong thing, and then I'll be editing it and I'll be like, damn, it's not what I wanted to say. And then
that's why you got to hit that B-roll. You got to do the phone camera.
Yeah. I actually forgot to mention.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
I don't know. I struggle with reviews, but one of the hardest videos I did was that tier ranking at the end of the year. I did my tier ranking every book I read in 2022. I immediately realized that I don't think about books like that.
Yeah.
Like, I very much am like checked out on like, well, this book's here and this book's here. So I don't do a lot of ratings and stuff, mainly because it stresses me out.
I thought I had a bunch of ideas I wanted to do for year-end vids when it came to all the books I read. And I didn't anticipate how difficult those would be, strictly because, like you said, I'm at the point where it's 2023. I'm excited to read new stuff. I am not really thinking about stuff I read in March of 2022. And especially when it comes to comparing it against other books that I read in the year, it's just not something that was really at the top of my mind when I think back on that book. So I did like a top 10, and that was hard because I was like, literally, if a book's on this list, I really, really loved it. It's not really like having it 10 versus 2. It doesn't matter. Like, I really love that book. So,
and you could always do the Philip Chase cop out to say, these were my favorites. No numbers for anyone ever.
Everything's equal.
I bet Philip will change his mind on star ratings whenever his book comes out. He's going to want a bunch of 5 stars.
Oh, yeah.
Where's that going to get him? I'm just going to mark it red on Goodreads. No review.
God, that comes out. That book comes out way sooner than I was expecting. It comes out
like 2 weeks.
Oh, my God. I was expecting like summer or something. I was super hyped when Alan said, end of March, whenever it's coming out.
Yeah. It will be
exciting.
Just a few weeks, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous for him.
Yeah.
Alan said he DNF'd Way of a Dan. He said he DNF'd it. My God, the audiobook narrator DNF'd Way of a Dan.
It's the abridged version.
That's not a good sign. That's not a good sign. Do you ever write
abridged audio?
Do you write your own stories or anything?
I do. I haven't done it for the last couple of months, but I did all the time growing up, and in college I did it once in a while. And during COVID, I actually picked up on it much more.
Nice.
But again, like I was saying earlier, when I started doing booktube, I found it time to write. It's more difficult to actually to make, but it's something I would love to do. I mean, writing a book is a dream. I think it's so cool. Like whether you're, doing self-published or you're traditionally published, whatever route you're going, or even if it never gets published, I think just the fact of, someone sitting down and having an idea and writing it into a book is super awesome. I can't imagine the feeling.
Yeah. To imagine someone, I get that feeling sometimes whenever I realize people watch my videos, because I know there's 150 people watching right now, and then there's a couple thousand to watch these after the fact, but it doesn't register with me all the time. And I was talking to Ben from the Discord, and we were talking, and he was like, yeah, I remember I bought that book. I was playing a game and I was watching your video at the same time, and I bought that book. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I forgot that people watch my videos. So I couldn't imagine having an original, I'm talking about other people's stuff, but your original idea and the way that you see humanity or the world or whatever, and be putting out into a way that other people can consume it, and then they resonate with it. I couldn't imagine that high.
So it's just it's so unique too. I can't think of, because it's so personal. Something like movies, if you're a screenwriter or you're a movie director, it is definitely your piece of art that is going out there, but there's so many other, there's other people involved in book writing as well. But I think there's clearly other people involved when it comes to something like film and even music, that I think, novel writing and short story writing is, just a little, it's just very unique. I can't really think of another thing like it. Maybe painting, actual sitting down and artwork like that would be on a similar level, where it's your 100% your view on whatever you're talking about and out there for the world to pick apart.
Yeah, it was one of the things that was very addicting about wrestling is I would have an idea and I would know how to build around that idea in that moment in a match.
Yep.
And I would be looking for a certain reaction from the crowd. And when it worked, which as you go on, you get better at this if you're good. And I was good. So, I kept getting those reactions. And dude, there's nothing like it.
Oh, yeah.
You feel like you got 1,000 people in the palm of your hand. And they're hinging on your next movement. It's incredible. So I couldn't imagine what Germ felt watching people react to the Red Wedding in real time, screaming at their televisions or at their books, right? I can't even imagine that.
No,
that high that you have to feel from that.
Or even just, people online theorizing and making multiple hour videos about some random thing in your series. I cannot imagine, writing a series and then having the very tiny piece of a chapter in a book being turned into a 4-hour, very passionate video by a fan. That's just so cool and unique. I don't know.
Yeah, and it just depends as long as it's good, right?
Yeah, that's always a factor.
That's always it's always a risk that you take.
Yep.
Key says, speaking of writing fiction, did you guys see what happened to Clark's World magazine? They shut down their submissions because of the flood of AI stories that were sent. Yeah, this has been talk about everywhere. I've seen Robin Hobb chime in on it as well, and they were kind of talking about the idea that there are writers that are using AI almost as a tool and helping them write their stories, or just writing the story straight up. And funny enough, I think it was Brian Staveley, which wrote The Emperor's Blades, had a whole Twitter thread where he essentially asked for an intro for a fantasy book, and he did editing and revisions on it. And I don't know if he got any blowback for that or not, because I don't think he's using it to write his books or anything, but he was just doing it as an exercise. Let's see what this thing puts out, and let's see if I could revise it to make it a legible story. And I thought it was fascinating, massive thread. It was way too long, and I honestly wasn't that interested in what he was revising, so I was like, whatever. But this is a hot topic. People are mad about it, and it is, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm obviously against it. I obviously don't like that. I don't want AI replacing artists either.
Yeah, the artwork was another big one.
But Tad Williams, when he was on here, my buddy Tad, I get to say that now. Rad Tad. He said, I'm not shocked. This is an inevitability of the society, of how we do things. It's cheaper. It's more efficient. You can get more done. And here we are. It is interesting to think about the fact that we have we see a lot of automation on the horizon.
Yep.
Is it okay to be cool with drivers being automated out of their job and then not be cool with an author being automated out of their job? Do you see what I mean? Like, it has made me, because I think the answer is I'm not cool with it, obviously. I mean, I assume that's probably a pretty popular opinion around these parts.
Yeah.
But it's actually really made me reevaluate how I look at all the other things that can get automated. Now, there is an argument between like, a 9-to-5 job where maybe the person would rather be doing something anyways, and maybe it would free them up to do that thing or whatever it might be, to compare to art, which obviously is done from human nature and human passion and emotion. So I understand that they're not identical, but it's just one of those things where it's like, you hear about like wanting to automate trucking, for instance. And a lot of people just kind of like turn a blind eye or say, well, that's just the way she goes. And it's like, well, now I think about that a little bit differently, right? Because it's impacting something that we love and people that we love and care about and respect. And you just, I don't know. It's a tough one.
It is. And I totally agree with you. I'm absolutely against, AI written art. I think there's a few sites I've seen over the last couple of weeks as this topic has exploded over the last, a little bit of time. I think like a few sites posted reviews of various things, like not necessarily art, but just like reviews of, maybe tech or something. And they will title it like AI version. And then they would make 2 reviews. One would be like the AI version and one would be their written review. And it's very interesting because I'm like, who prefers the AI version? The AI version like doesn't even read like a normal.
I think it's literally just because it'll generate clicks.
Yeah, it's like all about, exactly clicks, content creation, and whatever else, people are prioritizing, and not necessarily about what is actually being said on the page.
I think you just hit the nail on the head of what's wrong with the internet. Because how many people are clicking on that? Millions of people might click on that article, but they're just going to they're going to scroll to the bottom and be like, I don't like AI. It's engagement, it's more clicks, it's more ads. So it's almost like, I wonder if a lot of this scrutiny is not generated and manufactured by the people using, you know what I mean? Like it's an illusion to create outrage in some ways. But I mean, it is very real as far as the technology goes. Though I do think Chat GPT, as someone who's in tech, I think it is a little overstated. People are getting a little too crazy with what they think the capabilities could be. But regardless, how do you feel about AI generated art for a series that has no art?
What do you mean?
Like, are you like, for instance, Second Apocalypse? There's very little fan art of the Second Apocalypse by
I know, that's a bummer.
And then I've been seeing people that are running the passages through AI, and it's generating art that is amazing, that does not exist. So for me, I'm like, I'm okay with that.
I think fan art's an area where, sure, because I will like that, especially after reading the book that isn't written by AI and then looking at the artwork. Like Second Apocalypse, I've only read Prince of Nothing, but I would love to see that artwork, regardless of who's making it. I think it's a different conversation when it becomes like what we're putting on the front of book covers and what we're like profiting off of. I think that's a different discussion. But when it comes to just like people, testing AI and putting keywords in or putting phrases from their favorite books to see what art comes up, I just think, that's really cool. There's, some really cool artwork that may come out of that. I'm not going to like rule that out completely or anything. Plenty of series that just don't have enough art in general. So
it's one of the hardest things about wanting to create like maybe a little bit more spruced up, engaging booktube video is like,
I know. No,
you're like, man, I would love to put a lot of effort into this review, but I have one photo and then like a 7x7 pixelated version of the back cover. Like, I just don't have a lot to go with. And I know some people use stock footage, but for some reason, I'm going to be honest, folks, when people use like stock footage in their book reviews, I'm just like, I don't know. I don't like it. It's like, this book has a lot of tea, and it's like 2 random people drinking tea at a cafe. And I'm just like, why? I don't know. Stock footage bothers me.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. The other thing is I'll get super weird about like even art that you find on like ArtStation and whatever. Unless I get like express permission, I just try to avoid putting in videos because I'm just like I just don't even want to deal with any possible negative implication that this could happen. Even if I don't know.
Yes.
I think I overthink it. I think a lot of people just, use it and credit it and whatever else, but I will stress out about it for no reason.
Yeah, I try to avoid all stress when it comes to this stuff.
I agree.
This is the
Yeah.
most fun thing I get to do in my life, and
Exactly.
I never want that to stop.
Yeah.
A book, if people are curious, that I listened to and I thought it was really good back in the day, probably like 2 years ago, is Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, and it is written by Max Tegmark. I think Max is a physicist, but I might be getting that wrong. But he has this entire opening prologue where he essentially gives like a thought experiment about like what the future of AI could look like. And it's kind of creepy. Like, and this isn't written like 50 years ago, so it's not that impressive. I think it was written maybe 8 or 10 years ago. But he talks about essentially a company who finds out a way to have AI generate content and like lifelike figures that you can't even tell the difference. Like at first it's just writing scripts and then it just starts doing the whole production. So it's like a Netflix that's done all by AI, but people don't know it's done by AI. So they're not aware. And the algorithm is able to create more content based on the information that they're getting from the data, kind of like what we see with TikTok, right?
It's like Black Mirror.
Yes, and it's this idea that there's big media conglomerate out there that owns, like they buy Disney or whatever it might be, and it's all AI. And by the time people figure it out, it's like it's too late, and they are the biggest company on the NASDAQ. And I don't know that I think there is more transparency about who's using AI right now, at least.
Yeah.
To have that exact situation happen, but I don't think that we're going to be that far away from, basically what Cappuccino Craft says here. We'll have CG video and audio generate performance in movies, even full cast and full movie done digitally. Yeah, I think that that's definitely possible.
And I think that brings up a great point in the fact that, if people don't know it's AI, that's a whole nother layer. Like, do people... I don't know. It's just a huge complication that, especially in, if you picked up a book that sounded good and you just went in it with the full intention of you were reading a book that someone, whoever name was on the cover, had written, you read it, you really enjoy it, and it becomes like your favorite book that you read that year. All of a sudden you find out it was written by AI and it's just like your whole world comes crashing down. But at the same time, you're kind of like, but do I hate that book now? Or I don't know. It's just a huge complication that I definitely think is going to be, like you're saying, is, a lot of things will go that way.
The first booktuber to put out an AI review is going to get roasted. It's going to be bad. There you go. There's your 1 million view idea right there. I reviewed an AI written book. With a thumbs up on the thumbnail with a big red thing pointing to a robot with a pen. There you go. I just gave you 1 million views.
There it is.
Retweeted.
Mr. Beast video.
Yeah, it's a Mr. Beast video. The red arrow is very important. The red arrow on the thumbnail is if you watch anything that tells you how to YouTube or whatever, I'm pretty sure that that's the first thing they say, right? And Lucas brings up a good point. Ted Chiang, I had an article about ChatGPT, and it brought up a lot of good points, and he hit the nail on the head. The ChatGPT is not necessarily the problem now, as in it's not as capable as a lot of the headlines are making it out to be, but it is a symptom of something larger that's coming, and it's only going to get better, to be honest with you, especially now that it's public and people are feeding it more information. Try to tell people all the time, like, data is currency. Data is very important, and people think that they shouldn't care about that data, and you definitely should. Who knows? Maybe Bezos is scraping our Goodreads accounts and just going to start releasing books for us as individual readers. That would be crazy.
Before updating Goodreads itself, it's just going to start. Is it moral?
Is it moral on the thumbnail in big red letters? I would definitely watch that. Yeah, it's crazy, dude. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna hold in. I know that I don't like AI being used for covers of books and things. I'm already mad enough that people like Michael Whalen are getting passed on because they're amazing
I
and they want
know.
to be paid and compensated for the work, and I just don't think it's fair.
Like I mean, that's something I've always loved about fantasy is artwork. Even like the really, you know, quote unquote cheesy artwork back 20, 30 years ago. I love that. The genre is always really focused, a big focus of it, especially in the publishing side of things, has been artwork, more so than in some other genres. And I just think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer to see some of it being published as like AI generated art.
Yeah. Though sometimes I wonder, could AI beat maybe this?
Yeah.
If for people who are only listening, I'm holding up a Storm of Swords mass market paperback that I'm reading through.
Talk
And
about a series that could have awesome artwork just for covers. Like,
the
why?
show has, I think, bankrupt. I've used bankrupt twice now this stream. A little bit of the creativity when it comes to this. There's a lot of people who do great fan art for it, but I think a lot of the sketches I see are hand drawn things on Twitter and Reddit. It's just the actor or actress, and I'm like,
It's a bummer.
yeah, I like looking at the stuff pre-show. Like if you go back, there is a role-playing Game of Thrones board game. And it came with an art book. And my friend found it at Half Price Books. So he bought me the game and the art book. The art book art is crazy. Like compared to what we
imagine.
But some of them do look like the cast, and this is years before the cast ever existed. So it's interesting that I wonder if they use that as like a guide point to be like, this is kind of what we're going for. Probably,
Yeah.
right?
I'm sure, at least somewhat. God, that is interesting. I would love to see that.
I don't
like. I would love to see like Tyrion, like Hodor. I'm trying to think of characters that are very specific looking.
I do have it. I have it here on the shelf. I'm gonna grab it.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So this is, and I'm sorry for all the audio listeners, I'm holding it up, but this is like the art for it, right? Like Daenerys is a total romance fantasy babe. Just total 10. My God. But actually, that might be Cersei. I'm not totally sure. It has to be Cersei because Daenerys is like 14, so she should not.
I was gonna say, yeah.
Especially in this edition of it. So I think that's actually Cersei. But that's another thing. Like the ages are totally different. So this is Daenerys.
She's much younger.
Oh my God. Way younger, right? So it's blonde hair, but really different. I'm gonna just flip through this a couple times so you guys can, for those who are watching, can actually see it. We have well, that's not a spoiler. That's in book 1. Rhaegar being slayed at the Trident by Robert.
Yeah,
like what?
There's definitely badass. Oh my God, there's definitely they definitely used whatever art was available to at least in their thinking for the show. I would imagine. But damn.
Yeah, just a little bit more imaginative.
Yeah.
So here's
it's like whenever you see
Arya and
oh wow,
Jon Snow and everyone else. Pretty dope, right?
Look at Jon Snow.
So this is a cool book. It's called The Art of George R. R. Martin's The Song of Ice and Fire. And it is put out by like some Fantasy Flight games. If you guys ever want to see it, really cheap if you can find it. It's like $10.
That's like, have you ever seen any of there's the animated movies and stuff, but have you ever seen any of the artwork for like Lord of the Rings before the movies? Before the Peter Jackson movies, all the artwork for Lord of the Rings is just crazy. Like some of the artwork for that series is just like, wow. Like I've never pictured these characters that way, but I also grew up with the movie, so it's different.
Yeah, and I know people love pointing it out, but our of the people who grew up with the movies, our books, the idea of the books are perverted a little bit because we can't separate. At least I can't. I'm not that good.
Yeah, no.
I can do it with The Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones, but I cannot do it with Lord of the Rings. It's just impossible.
No. Yeah, because like I remember the movies first came out, and my dad always talked about like, oh, I grew up reading these books like in the 70s and 80s or whatever, and he was like excited for the movies, but it was very different. Whereas me, I saw the movies before I ever read the books, and then I read the books, and it's very hard to separate the two, even though there's plenty of things that are very different about them.
Yeah, definitely. Cersei's getting a lot of hate in the chat, which is fair. Oh man. Oso says the actress that played young Rhaenyra probably looked more like Dany than Emilia Clarke, but you can't have adult scenes with young teens on TV. Yes, thankfully not.
Yeah.
And I would actually agree. I think that young Rhaenyra probably does look a little bit more like Daenerys than Emilia Clarke.
I do know I forget the actress's name, but there was a different actress for Daenerys before Emilia Clarke. Like they did a pilot that was terrible, and then they reshot the whole pilot because they showed the pilot to HBO, and the HBO was like, no, go back. This is terrible. And
Yes.
they recast Dany in that point, but I forget what that actress's name was.
Pretty sure they recasted Cersei and Jaime as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the pilot apparently was just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I know.
The fact that they got to remake it's crazy.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen very often.
Canceled.
Yeah,
especially in like 2009 or whatever. They were at 2010.
I mean, that's like off the heels of like Sopranos. So this is before like everyone had accepted the fact that TV could be something omega, right?
Yeah.
Skeletor, this has nothing to do with the time, but I just think this is absolutely hilarious. And I also love the name Skeletor in all caps with the Skeletor picture. Says, when I was a little kid, I thought horseradish was made from real horses. The more you know. The more you know.
You learn something new every day.
You sure do. So what are you reading now? What's your current read?
Deadhouse Gates.
Oh, that's right. You did say that. So you're one book at a time?
For the most part. I usually do one. That's something that's changed. But I'm usually one physical, one audio, and the audio is very picky. I'm very picky about what I listen to audio, but I usually try to have something going.
Mm-hmm.
Before booktube, I was absolutely one book at a time, and I've tried to become more of like one book, two books at a time, but they can't be similar. Like they have to be pretty different in order for me to do that. Just because otherwise I won't be motivated to read both. I will just read one and finish it and then go back and read the other one. Whereas if it's like a total sci-fi book or a horror book and then a epic fantasy, it's very easy for me to bounce between the two because I'll be in the mood to read one or the other. Instead if it was just like a Game of Thrones and Malazan at the same time. Like I haven't done that. Even though I'm reading the series at the same time, I'm not reading the books at the same time because which for sure be too hard.
Yeah, I like doing multiple books, but they generally have to be pretty different. I'll even hold off on starting a next one if I one of my current ones ends, but the next one up's too similar. I'll just wait because I don't like getting things mixed up, and sometimes that happens. And God, I don't want that to happen on a review. That'd be terrible.
I did. Oh my gosh.
Alan wants to know: did you finish Shogun Book 3?
I did. I finished it the other night, and it's interesting because I was telling Theo and Baron and the other people in the Grimoire Discord that I was not motivated to pick up Shogun in the middle of February. I was like, you know what? I enjoyed the first two parts. I really enjoyed the first two parts, but I just wasn't in the mood for historical fiction. And I kind of had trouble getting back into it. The first two chapters, I was like, these are good. I'm still liking the story, but I kind of wanted to read something else. But then I got into the groove and I ended up enjoying it. It was very different from the first two parts, and I'm sure Alan and everyone who's reading it will talk about it on the live show. But it's a good book. I totally see why some people wouldn't like it. There's definitely some things in there that I think would frustrate a lot of readers in today's day and age. So we'll see. But I like it. I love epic historical fiction, and there's just sometimes where. And this is tricky with read-alongs. There are some times where you're not 100% in the mood for something you are reading along, and you both don't want to bail or like go behind on a read-along, but at the same time, you also don't want it to negatively impact your opinion of what you're reading.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
do you think it's Alan's fault that his read-alongs always fall apart, or do you think it's more of the material?
Well, I think fingers crossed Shogun has gone pretty well so far, but I think I have noticed that Alan is still, well, those aren't read-alongs, but he's still like what 15% through Blade itself. Is he still reading that
Yes, I
for
think
the last about 4 months?
I think I think he is.
He has picked some real heavy hitters though. I mean, I wasn't a part of it, but Emperor's Blades that seemed to do really well with the fan base.
Oh, what a stinker, huh? I mean, if you know, it's all so all the new booktubers out there. If you want to wait, if you want an example of what not to do, you can always check out Emperor's Blades. Oh God.
That might be the fastest I've seen a read along disintegrate, just like totally implode.
It was something to be studied. I mean, I think we need a rise and fall of Emperor's Blade, a rise and fall of the Library of Alexandria. Even, I mean, it just it put the brakes on it. Just bad, not good. No, Shogun seems to be going well. I think it is certainly not an Emperor's Blades, and it's interesting to see all the people who have actually jumped on that read along, and I need to read it so I can actually watch the live shows.
Yeah, I think what helps is one. I think splitting it over 3 months is really helpful for a lot of people because we are reading it with a community that, you know, a lot of people do read a lot of fantasy and science fiction, and Shogun is neither of those, and it's, you know, very much historical fiction. So for a book that is 1,300 pages long, to say, hey, we're going to read it in January, I feel like a lot of people would have gotten 200 pages and bailed, whereas spreading it out at least breaks it down, makes it more digestible for people.
Yeah, for sure. And Tori says Shogun is super fun. I'm loving it. And I'm only jesting. I know what people are actually really enjoying, and I have to.
Yeah.
Alan said he's selling his account to a bot farmer. I don't think you're going to get much, man. 10K is the minimum. 10K subs.
Alan could be the first AI booktuber.
Oh my God. Hey, I
find everything.
I know some content creators that they go to the Chat GPT for their thumbnails now.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that wild? How does that make you feel?
Makes me question everything I've ever done.
Amanda's inviting Alan to do a year-long buddy read of a KJ Parker novella, and if people are interested in KJ Parker, there you go.
Page a day.
It's perfect. Zara reads with Zara.
Oh yeah,
she posted a interview with KJ Parker, and he seems like just a wonderful person. Yeah. I've only read one of his books, and I liked it fine, but I thought that the interview was awesome. I really liked the setup of it, and she did a great job with that. So go check that out if you're a KJ Parker fan. All 4 of you, that's over there on Zara's channel. I'm just kidding. A lot of people like KJ Parker.
What
they have to. He's written so many books.
So many. And I even think, isn't that a pseudonym? That's not his real name, right? He's written other
Tom
things.
Holt, I think, is his real name.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
He's written a ton. What KJ Parker book did you read? The Company?
The Company. It was good. I actually think you would really like it. I had a little bit of wrong expectations going into it because I expected there to be fantasy in it, and there is not fantasy in it. It is very much almost like that Guy Gavin, like set in an alternate world.
Yeah.
Pretty much no fantasy at all. So I was a little taken back by that, but his actual writing, like his technical writing, is super good. And he's obviously a genius. Yeah, I mean, he's very intelligent. So I'm excited to.
Yeah, I want to read that. Folding Knife sounds like a book I'd really like. I think when I did my review for Trader Baru Cormorant, people kept bringing up Folding Knife. They were like, if you like economics and political stuff in books, you'll like The Folding Knife. So that's a book I really want to read. And you need to read TBC for sure.
I am this year. It made the list. Quite a few people who have watched the channel for a long time have been trying to get me to read that, and you're one of them. And I have such high hopes for it. Like, I'm almost a little nervous because I'm so excited for it.
I think it is a book that the second you start reading it, you'll see why many people it doesn't work for people. I do think you will like it though. I really do. I'd be very curious if it didn't work out. Why? Because it does seem kind of right up your alley in terms of the other stuff you've liked. Like that's what you liked about The Grace of Kings and what you liked about, Baker and stuff. I feel like TBC, it's very unique. I've not read anything else like it. I still need to read the sequels, but we're still waiting on the final book of that series. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like, I
and
don't want to rush through the series and wait.
Seth Dickinson also just released a sci-fi book too, so
Mhm.
that'll be interesting to see if people who enjoyed TBC enjoy that. So
Yeah,
Fit to be right said, Jimmy, your Remembrance of Earth Past video was excellent. Thank you
it
so
was.
much. Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate it. And thank you, Alex. That was a video I was very excited to make.
Yeah.
A little nervous too, but I was excited because I had a lot to say and relating. I just kept thinking about the pale blue dot like over and over and over again with Carl Sagan. And I wish I could have done a little bit more editing because I had an idea of like the video to make, but I also didn't want to seem like a Quinn's Ideas like knockoff brand.
I know.
So I was like, I'll just keep my face in the video most of the time. So
His Remembrance of Earth's Past videos are just like
the GOAT.
Oh my gosh.
They're the best.
Yeah.
They're so good.
They're so good.
That was the best part about finishing it is I could go watch his videos.
I watched all of them. I was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
That's why when I finished the Dark Forest, I started to look stuff up, and I was just like, no, I just need to finish the book 3 because everything is like full series spoilers. So I pretty much read it right after that.
I learned a lot whenever I started looking into those videos. I'm thinking about reaching out to Quinn to see if he'll come on Chatting with Nuts.
You should.
It's a long shot, but
yeah,
we're gonna try.
He seems super nice.
He's
a great guy. He's also a huge Song of Ice and Fire fan, obviously.
Yes.
So
one of the few people who was not on the bandwagon of the Game of Thrones show after like season 3. He started raising some red flags, and as early as season 5, he was like, guys, I'm telling you, the show's off the rails. And everyone was like, nah, like you're a hater. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, they're going down a bad path. And I got to give him credit because he was spot on. Like he and if you go back and look, I mean, he had those videos, and before it was the thing to do, he was putting up those flags. So he knows what he's talking
I remember even through like all my roommates in college weren't readers. So they didn't read any of the Saga of Ice and Fire books. But they were big fans of the show. And I remember when season 5 and 6 were out, they, everything was just like shock value. Everything was just so cool. And no one really picked up on, oh, this is going downhill. And then I feel like when I started watching it more on my own and away from people with season 7, and then 2 years later, season 8, I was just like, yeah, yikes.
Yeah.
And then when I reread the series, I was like, yikes. I see.
I had issues in season 6. Season 5 and season 6, I started getting a little worried. But the funny thing about me is I actually don't hate it nearly as much as other people do, like where they feel like it assaulted their family. I don't feel that way. There's clearly things I very much dislike, but I feel like my expectations weren't like that high going into that final season, not nearly as much as
I think the others. I think season 7 put my expectations at least on guard for the fact that it wasn't. They had already shortened the season to season 7 was like 7 episodes or something. So the second that they did that, I was like, this season already feels a little shortchanged in terms of development of stuff.
Yeah.
That when they announced season 6, everyone was like, oh, each episode's gonna be 3 hours. I was like, each episode's not gonna be 3 hours. It's just gonna be a shorter season.
That's
but
right.
So it was a bummer. I think it was just disappointing because you're just like, because even looking back on it, I mean, parts of that show are just absolutely some of the best stuff I've ever watched on TV. Like it's some of my favorites acting, some of my favorite writing, and it's just disappointing in terms of when you're watching it live. You're just like, really?
Yeah,
this is the best.
Yeah, I hate season 7 more than 8. That's a
season
hot
7's
take.
rough.
But I think season 7's really bad. Like I actually think it's some bad television too. But what do I know? I know books. I don't know this, and I barely know books. So Alan was asking who Quinn is. So it's Quinn's Ideas. He did a lot of Game of Thrones content, but he does a ton of sci-fi now. He's starting to get even into like Revelation Space and a bunch of other stuff. But he does really good Dune content. Probably the Dune content creator for me. And Hyperion and other things.
Yeah,
and
his Hyperion videos are good.
Mitch answered and said, it's a high sub channel Jimmy wants to schmooze with. And then Alan responded, isn't he doing that tomorrow with Joanna and Murphy? And for those who are wondering, tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern time, I will be live on Joanna's channel with Murphy appear, and we will be doing Why Read, which is a long form conversation about why we read. And Alan is very unhappy with me that I'm selling out, apparently. So that's a thing.
Oh, Alan.
Oh man. But yeah, I don't know. I was happy with the Remembrance of Earth's Past. I was a little nervous because sci-fi is not my thing, and I know that, you know, I said best sci-fi, but for me and in my experience with it, it is the best sci-fi that I have read. So
yeah, I agree. I haven't read nearly enough sci-fi as I would like to. There's so much stuff out there I would love to read. So many authors I want to read. Alistair Reynolds, you know, Peter Hamilton.
Peter Hamilton's really high on my list.
Yeah,
for
for sure. A lot of people are reading like Commonwealth Saga and stuff right now, and I'm just like, that sounds. I just keep seeing it everywhere. I'm just like, that sounds so good. I need to read it. You know, Philip K. Dick and more authors I just really want to dive into. Just read a lot of. I don't know. It's tricky. I feel like I've been reading all my life, and I've read a lot of a lot. Like I've read like a little of a lot. I've read a lot of different genres consistently since the time I started reading. So I've always dabbled in like a variety of different genres, whether it's like nonfiction or literary fiction or horror or whatever it is. And because of that, I feel like there are some genres that I want to read significantly more of that I just haven't had the time to. And I'll just like
you just end up coming back to fantasy every time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love it. There's also so much fantasy I have not read that I want to read. Like a ton. And I just keep finding better stuff, keep finding stuff I enjoy. And that leads me to other things I've never heard of that all of a sudden I'm like, well, now I need to read that. And that's, you know, that's half the fun. You're never going to be able to read everything. So half the fun is just finding things that are like things that you enjoyed and then experimenting with it.
What is the fantasy series that you're most excited to read that you haven't read yet?
Well, right now, Aspect Emperor.
Let's go. You're just sucking up.
No, I think this would be a different answer a couple of months, like probably 2 months ago. But right now, 100% Aspect Emperor, just because Prince of Nothing, I enjoyed that so much. And I've just only heard amazing things. And basically, everyone who's read Aspect Emperor is like, if you enjoyed Prince of Nothing, you will love Aspect Emperor, even though it goes in some places you'll never see it in other series. And so I am very excited for that. Outside of that, I don't know. I'm excited for stuff like Stormlight strictly because of how big it is. I'm kind of mad at myself that I've not read it, or at least tried it more than like half of Way of Kings. And another big one is actually Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. That's a big series that I have not read that I am reading this year, and it's a big fantasy series I am excited to cross off.
I mean, the great thing about Tad Williams is if you don't like it, he has like 5 other massive series that you can start. So there's something for everybody when it comes to Rad Tad. I love Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and I have a pretty strong feeling you're gonna like it. I feel like it's up your alley. It is beautifully written, in my opinion. And man, I'm so glad you're gonna read that. I'm reading Shadow March. I need to get to book 2, but I'm also planning on starting Otherland this year, and maybe September, October. Words in Time, Kev, and some other people have decided that they want to get to it. And Otherland is supposed to be his weirdest stuff.
Yeah,
I'm excited for it. Also has really cool covers.
Awesome. Yeah, it does. I love those covers. The first book, like the gold or yellow one, or whatever. I've seen that all over the place before I ever heard of. Really even knew who Tad Williams was. I always loved that cover art.
Yeah, I always say it helps that Tad is such a good dude.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, he's really incredible, and has a lot of range too. So I always, a lot of people say start with Memory and Sorrow and Thorn, but like if you're kind of tired of that traditional fantasy, like if you're sick of it, he's one of those authors that like actually take chances and goes for some crazy stuff, and that's cool. I want to read Tail Chasers at some point too. Like I always forget it exists.
And you read the standalone, like War of the Flowers. Is that a standalone?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard great things about that too. And I'm always looking for standalone. Talk about a type of fantasy I want to read more of. Standalone fantasy. I just have not. GGK, like, have just not read any of it. I need to.
Yeah, GGK is when it clicks with you, I feel like people just run through his books and love them. I
Yeah.
know there's plenty of people in the Discord that are big fans. For me, I have read 2 books. So I've read Lions of Alverson, and
Yep.
I read, what was the other one I read? Oh, Under Heaven. And I thought Under Heaven was better than Lions, but I thought both were great books. But I've always wanted just a little bit more from it. So I'm wondering if Tagana will be that book, because I hear that that is like very fantasy. Or the
Yeah.
Finavar, I think I'm saying that right. Tapestry is also high fantasy, kind of
Yes.
his
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings type deal. So I kind of want to read his more fantasy driven stuff and then come back to his non-fantasy stuff, like Song for Arbonne. Arbonne? I don't know. Am I
Yep.
saying it right? Sure.
Song for, I think it's something like that.
Arbonne.
Arbonne.
Arbonne, whatever. That one seems also to be compelling in its premise. So those are the
Yep.
ones that are on my radar. But I do look for standalone books to read all the time, especially shorter ones that I can knock out.
Yeah.
I find it to be very rewarding to get a whole story done in like 500 pages. One that I just
Oh
finished
yeah.
recently, The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers, which was recommended to me by Christopher Rocchio, and then
Yep.
reading
He loves Tim
Rainbow.
Powers.
Yes. And how is Tim Powers not talked about more on our slice of
Oh my
YouTube is
gosh.
crazy. After reading that book, actually, I can tell you why, because it's wild. Like, it's so much to talk about and so much to understand. Like, there were times where I didn't know what was going on, kind of the China Miéville vibe at some times,
Okay.
but his own thing entirely. And there's a character in Anubis Gates that I think may have inspired Pennywise. Like, that's a rumor.
Really?
I don't even know if it was written before it. This might be Wikipedia boning me right now, but that is something that I did read on, I think it was Wikipedia, or maybe it was his author page. I don't know. But anyways, The Anubis Gates by Tim Powers was a time travel sci-fi fantasy / horror historical fiction. It's insane. Yep. This dude's range is outlandish. There's no reason an author should be good at all of these things. I mean, it is banana sandwich. And wow. I implore people to go and read it. I thought the writing was phenomenal. It is quickly paced, has really great characters, not ones that you're going to get like, oh, they're like my brothers, you know, like, but they're just good characters. They're solid. Yeah. Maybe not the most well-rounded, but just solid characters. And Key actually says China Miéville mentioned him as an influence. Doesn't surprise me in the least.
Wow. That's like, yeah, I mean, Rocchio, he's always talking about Tim Powers, and that he's probably the first big person that I heard talk about Tim Powers more than like just mentioning him. And I was at a used bookstore a few months ago, and I saw Tim Powers' name jump out to me, and that was 100% because I had recently watched some interview with Rocchio or something. And so I bought like the 3 books that were there. One of them was Anubis Gates. So definitely want to get to that. That's really cool. You guys all loved it because
it was a huge hit. It was a huge hit with everyone. Nice. And it just seemed like everyone kind of picked it up at the same time. And Reading Rainbow actually reread it and was talking to us about it. And I read it with Amanda, and Kev was reading it, and some other people were also, Mitch was in there, I think. And everyone was just kind of like, this is insanity. like the things that he does, you just don't do it all in one book. It was like he sat down at a writing circle. He went to his local bookshop and he talked to a guy that was writing a werewolf novel. He talked to a guy who was writing time travel, someone that was writing a killer clown type deal, one that was writing a historical fiction. And he was just like, you know what? All these stories sound good individually, but they'd be great as one book. And he just does it. And there's just some of the stuff that he does with the plot that I really enjoy. Like, he has like an inciting incident of this person who wants to do this thing, but our main character is like in that, like he is like kind of pulled into it. Okay. But he doesn't drop the inciting incident or the character. He actually like maintains that person's motivation throughout, even though they're not really a mainstay character. And it's just a little thing that he didn't even have to do, but he still did it. And it's like a 400, 500 page. I think it's a 400 page book.
Oh my gosh.
Really good. Really, really good. I did some of it on audio, and I thought the audio was pretty good, but it would be not a great idea, I think, to do it audio only. Maybe I'm wrong, but it can get very confusing. Very, very confusing.
No, it's awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited to check it out. Definitely. Yeah. It seems like you're saying, a lot of people are jumping on it.
Yeah, for sure. And you see a lot of Patrick Rothfuss. Obviously we talked about Rocchio and now China Miéville. I think this is one of those, like, your author's favorite author type thing. Kind of like I always say that about Tad Williams. I have a feeling that Tim Powers is that to a lot of people as well.
Awesome.
Erickson recommended there's a Vegas book, and I wanted to read it, but I never got to it. And I don't know what it's about. All I know is it's about some dude going and playing poker in Vegas. It's supposed to be insane. It's supposed to be just absolutely insane.
Is it like sci-fi fantasy, or is it just straight
sci-fi fantasy?
Whoa,
he writes weird fiction. I mean, that's
nice.
what you could probably put it in. So if you're someone who likes weird fiction, I think that Tim Powers is someone that you definitely need to put on the TBR, and his books are standalones. Last Call is what it's called. Thank you, Amanda.
Last Call.
I've heard it's excellent.
Well, I will be 100% raising his books up the TBR.
You damn well better.
Never ending TBR.
Lucas says, I heard he wrote the book Pirates of the Caribbean is inspired by it. I don't know.
He wrote On Stranger Tides. I think he wrote a book called On Stranger Tides, which is a pirate book. I don't know if Pirates of the Caribbean's based on it. I know there was a Pirates of the Caribbean movie named On Stranger Tides, so maybe it's the same plot. But I do know he's written that book because I've seen that book before.
Well, there you go.
He seems very versatile, which is, I love when authors are, I love when authors do one thing and it's like really done extremely well, but I also love when authors are, doing a whole bunch of stuff and just really just tackling whatever idea they're excited about.
Yeah, if you sit down and you write it down on paper, like what Anubis Gates had in it, you'd be like, this is going to be a mess of a novel, and it's not. It's so tightly plotted and very funny. There are moments that are like laugh out loud funny, and I like self-deprecating, like sad humor where it's like, that's so bad, it's just funny, it's so bad. That's the kind of stuff that he does, and Doyle is just like the best protagonist. Is it Doyle? Yeah, it was Doyle. I had to think for a second. Is it Boyle or Doyle? Good stuff in that book. Really, really good stuff. So I think I might do a review for that book here on the channel if people are interested. Yeah, I'd like to get more people reading it because I think it's also one that you could like discuss and it would be a lot of fun. And I took a decent amount. I'm looking at it. My first note is this book is batshit crazy is my first note on my phone whenever I looked up for Tim Powers. So hoping to do a review for that. As well as some of the other stuff that I've been reading. I've been reading a lot of stuff that I feel like I have something to say about, which is great. Lycanius is one that I'm hoping to review, but I'm on the last book waiting for my friend Ben. And I'm hoping to get the third book finished maybe next month if I can. So I want to do like a whole trilogy because I feel the same about book one that I did book two that I do about book three. Like there's not much. So it's kind of.
So you've enjoyed the trilogy?
Yeah, it's not perfect. I mean, I've said this, it's flawed, but like for better or worse, it's sensational. And I mean that in a negative and positive way. It takes all the shortcuts that a sensational, moment-driven epic fantasy will take, and it delivers, in my opinion, on a lot of the moments. Now, the ending, I don't know. I haven't read the ending yet, so maybe the ending will absolutely, crap the bed and it'll be butt cheeks, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I would definitely read more of James Islington with that expectation going forward, that like he's not going to give me the most in-depth characters or anything. They're going to be paper thin, they're two-dimensional, and they're going to serve this insane plot. I would assume that that's how he's going to write all of his books.
I've heard it's like pretty ambitious of a first. Like I'm pretty sure that's his debut published books.
I believe it was self-published and then it got picked up by a publisher. I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yes.
Would you say it's like pretty ambitious in terms of like plot and everything else he's cramming in there?
Yeah, I mean it's heavily inspired, I would say, by like Books of Amber. Obviously, Wheel of Time is in there. I assume if he's read Sanderson, maybe that would be a play to that. It is high fantasy and it's fun, I guess, is the way that I would describe it. Cool. I think that there are some interesting aspects to some of the themes, but there's more potential in the themes than there ever is execution on them or thoughts. He just doesn't go there with anything. Like there's so much stuff he could have dug into and made this amazing. The thing I would say about it is a trilogy that should have been a 6 or 7 book series. That's what I would say. And if you took the extra time in a book and you kind of broke this up, and I'm saying 6 or 7 as like a random number. I'm not, I'm not hard. I haven't thought about where you would break up each book, but
exactly double these books.
If you gave things more breadth and you maybe took some time to explore some of
Yep.
these really interesting questions that you're actually posing about society and power dynamics, I think that you could have a monumental piece of fantasy. But instead, it's just a really interesting one. You know, like people aren't gonna make like essays about this in 20 years, and that's fine. We don't have to do that for every
Yeah.
series, but it feels like it could have been.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Because usually it's, you have series that are fun series that don't really try to be
Mm-hmm.
more than that. And that's, I love those. But it is interesting to have a series that you feel like could be more, and it just isn't hitting that same level of, some other series.
Yeah, but it does a lot of things very well. Like Benjamin
Yeah.
says here, flashbacks reveals of the past have been really good though. And I do think
Cool.
that I have found the time travel and the timeline stuff to be really interesting. So
Nice.
I'm also a big fan of time travel. Like
I am too.
you got me in the door. And that's why Anubis Gates, people said, Rockio told me that. He's like, you like time travel, you need to read Anubis Gates. Like, you want to get weird? You're going to get weird. And he was dead on. He was dead on. But hey, it's been two phenomenal hours talking to you. I'm not going to keep you here all night. But this was good. This was fun. And I think you should tell the people where they can find you at here on the interwebs.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everyone in the chat. I guess if you want to looking for more of me, I have my YouTube channel, which is Tall Guy Reads. And I am the same thing on anything else. So Twitter, Instagram, which is not really active. I never really post on there. Or the Discord, and I'm in a bunch of Discords that you can.
Yeah, talk about your Discord. Talk about your Discord because it's awesome. It's me and Alan have talked about how everyone's Discords are separated, but you and Baron and RJ and Theo have all taken a different approach. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a co-host of a Discord that we called the Grimoire Discord, and essentially there are 4 different booktube channels, one of which is in hiatus for Your Brain on Books, Baron's channel. And then we have Theo from Regional Reader, RJ from RJ Reads. And essentially, as Jimmy, you were saying, there's a ton of Discords. And I love that. I love how many Discords there are. I think it's really cool to have all these different communities to talk about books and series and have read-alongs and everything else that's going on with the community. And I just think that I at least didn't want the pressure of running a public Discord is a lot of pressure. Definitely. And a lot of time. And I also wanted the aspect to have it, build a good community, especially for a public community that anyone and everyone could join if they wanted to. We felt the approach of having 4 different channels kind of collaborate and make it a more communal area where there is, a little bit of everything. You have read-alongs going on that not every host of that Discord is a part of, and there's just like different things going on. There's like Steinbeck read-alongs going on at the same time that there is, Malazzo read-alongs, and so there is a lot of variety. And so I think it's a great place. It's really turned into a community that I like, talking in quite a bit. I love it, and so I'm a co-host of it, so I better love it. But I do really enjoy it. I found it to be, it's worked out extremely well, like better than I anticipated. So.
Has there ever been a power struggle? Has anyone tried to like supersede or maybe a coup? Like I could see RJ, getting big for his britches and being like, I'm going to take over this thing.
RJ has many times. He's absolutely wanted to, tear everyone away and just take full control.
I knew it.
No, not at all. It's like been actually extremely peaceful in terms of the co-host. It's kind of just like, there's never really anything that's come up where there's a disagreement between us. If there's something that comes up where it causes some like, hey, this person said this, should we say anything or do anything? We're usually on the same page if in anything like that, or if we want to add or make any tweaks to the Discord, we'll talk about it, but there's never really been any straight power struggle. So
are you accepting new members, or is this kind of like is this the NWO or is it the Generation X? Like, are we just going to continue to grow this thing, or is it going to stay that tight group?
In terms of like the 4 of us running it?
Yeah. Like, it's your kind of creation, right? And like, that's where people go to find you guys.
We've talked about it. We've talked about, opening it up, and definitely at least inviting some more moderators, I think would be helpful. just because it is growing. I think now it's at 600 or close to 700 members or something. So it's grown quite a bit. Yeah. And so it definitely will hit a point where, it will be helpful to have more help. As far as having more co-owners, that's absolutely something we would not roll out. I think we would totally consider it if it felt like, hey, we'll have this person help run the Discord. I think it'd be a lot a lot of fun. So yeah, I think
make sure
we're all
you
pretty
message
flexible.
Message Alex and flood him.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking for
what do I need to do?
They may not like the answer. What
they might not
to get in. You never know.
Yeah. It's just pledging.
It's a blood oath. They take it very, very serious. Baron does not mess around.
No.
What do we got to do to get Baron to unretire from BookTube?
I know. I keep pitching him like really cool buddy reads or chats that books he wants to read, but he's just been very busy. I mean, understandably so. He had a new baby and everything. He's just like, I haven't read a page in 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, come on. I would love to see it back. I love his videos. He has a really good ability to make a very informative review in under 7 minutes.
Which so is impressive.
A very difficult skill. I've never been able to do that, and I love his reviews. I mean, he also would always review books that like I was into, but I didn't see a lot of people talking about. So, Clive Barker and just like weird fiction. And I just, he had a lot of variety, like Lonesome Dove at the same time of doing like a Clive Barker book. And I've always loved his videos. So I would love for him to come out of retirement, but it's supposed to be fun. So if he's not having fun with it, if it's not working out in this day to day.
Yeah, for sure. And he's also a book collector, which I don't know if people know this about you, but you're a little bit of a book collector. And I know I was going to let you go, but I got to press you on this a little bit. What's the best book you own? What's your favorite?
Well, that is kind of changed. The best book in terms of the one that if I wanted to sell for a lot of money is also probably one I like the most. I somehow got the Passenger, Stella Maris, which are not my favorite Cormac McCarthy books, but I really enjoyed them. I did get the Picador signed like UK box set or whatever, which is like going for a stupid price. And I bought it for like $100 or something. And it's gorgeous. The whole box opening experience was like so unlike anything else I've experienced. And it was just a blast to get that in the mail.
That's awesome.
His signature is so like tiny and just very what you would expect a Cormac McCarthy signature to be. And I was just like, this is so cool. I don't know. My favorites would probably be like Stephen King first editions, to be honest. I love like just straight original books, like my It first editions a lot. I love that. It's I think there's a lot of stories behind used first editions that I've found and come across in different random bookstores in like random cities that I will always associate with certain books. So those end up being my favorite. Yeah.
That's my favorite. I had to lean on you and Baron a bit whenever I was getting that Subterranean Press Game of Thrones Clash of Kings, because I was very nervous that I was, oh yeah, is this guy legit? Those weren't cheap, but those are my favorites. And
oh my god, yeah, that was awesome. One awesome find, but so cool you jumped on it, because that artwork is fantastic.
Yeah, they're definitely my favorite books that I own, I would say, at this point. And yeah, I don't know if people know that you're a collector, but you got some bangers over there.
Yeah, I do. I haven't done that's actually something I haven't done on the channel, like a bookshelf tour or anything. And I think it's more because my books are kind of all over the place. I have like 2 huge shelves in the living room. I have 2 in here, and there's like 1 or 2 upstairs. So like if I did one, it'd kind of be like a mishmash of shelves all over this house, which I definitely could do. It'd be fun though. And it's also, I do have some gems. Yeah.
I've always felt weird about that stuff. I don't know why.
I know.
Maybe just, I don't know how I came up or something, but I've never been a like, look at this,
I
unless
agree.
it's something like kind of like novel, like my Berserk bookends that are like Guts' sword, like that. That's
That's
amazing. I
awesome.
love that. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just
I've
doesn't feel great, I guess.
Yeah. No, I feel you, and I feel like so much of it. I feel like there's different reasons why people collect stuff, and I think for me, at least in books, um, it's always been like just I'm not buying books I don't want, and so it's usually a
Mhm.
personal thing, and so like I'm not buying it for anyone else other than myself, and like if I go and sell a book, it's not because I'm trying to profit. That's is what it is, but it's usually because I'm not interested in owning that book on a personal level anymore. So it's like it's more of a personal thing than it is like, hey, look, I just scooped the
Right.
all uber limited edition of whatever it is.
Yeah. Some of my best books that I've collected are like next to my mass market paperbacks for like Lies of Locke Lamora. Like I don't know. Like of course I like my Berserk Deluxes. I like them on the shelf and stuff, but
Yep.
for a lot of the stuff, it's just sitting down there like on the shelf. Like it's
Yeah.
just part of it. And you're right. It's a very personal attachment to it. Book collecting
Yeah.
and book reading are very different. They're very, very
Oh
different.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean there are channels on YouTube that are
Yes.
100% book collecting, and it's all about the collectability of the books. And it's really cool. It's a very interesting world. You see 100% how expensive it can get, just like collecting anything, and how deep down a rabbit hole you can go with that stuff. But it is very different things. It's like playing music and collecting high fidelity music stuff. It's
Yeah.
very expensive and very different.
Both are very expensive.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much for coming on, and I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Everyone, make sure you go check out Alex's channel if you haven't. It's down in the description. You can jump from there and subscribe. Has a ton of good stuff. Me and him have very similar tastes, so if you like books that I like, he covers it. All the Bakerites. Head on over there. He's gonna be reading Aspect Emperor, which is really, really exciting. And
Yeah.
for once and for all, we need to know, Alex, how tall are you?
I am 5'2". No, I'm kidding. I'm 6'8".
6'8". My God, he's a
Yeah.
giant. He's a giant. I thought I was tall. I went down to ICFA and like everyone was shorter than me, and I felt like I felt like an idiot. Like I'm the big kid on the playground that like plays too hard. But for you, you'd make me feel like the short guy. So I'll need to have you there
Yeah.
to balance me out.
Yeah. There would be some great pictures.
It really would. We'll have to make it happen. We'll go down
Oh yeah.
to Philip's book release whenever he does it. We can meet halfway.
Nice. Midnight
Mike,
release.
yeah, that's right. Midnight release. Michael, thank you so much for the super sticker, fit to be read. I appreciate you. It's very generous of you. Everyone, give Alex a round of applause for being such a great guest tonight. He will definitely be back here on the channel. And chat, thanks for showing up and being here with us live. If you like this video, you can hit like. If you dislike it and hate everything we said, you can hit dislike. And if you loved it, think about subscribing. I would love to have you here. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciate it. Until me and Alex see you next time, be good, be safe. And remember to always keep turning the page.